the dachshunds.
And we're live.
As everyone discovers the reason why I don't have an Instagram.
Yeah, Chris was just talking to me about his Instagram and how great it is.
The dachshunds.
And we're live. Nice. Yeah. So thank you for hanging out tonight, Chris. We're missing one of our members, Zakil, but the show must go on. So you and I will be talking and hanging out.
I mean, he's allowed to have nights off. I have to admit to it in a weird way. And I know Zakil is going to be watching this one way or the other. It's kind of liberating to be able to say the word Magic the Gathering. And that's the majority of my business on stream.
Yeah, so we might be talking a little bit about that, a little flesh and blood, some other TCGs. For those of you who don't know, I'm with Chris, Wolf of 10th Street tonight, one of my co-hosts for the Pocket Change podcast. I guess I could link that somewhere here so that people can go check that out if they want to. But yeah, Chris, Zakil, Rainy Day Collectibles, who's not with us tonight, and I do a weekly podcast, or weekly, bi-weekly, weekly, mostly.
We tried to do weekly. Life has just gotten really hectic for us. I think weekly will be the main goal eventually. I would really like it to be the goal, honestly. I look forward to our chats.
Me too. Yeah, so mainly over there, we talk a lot about all TCGs, CCGs, honestly, collectible cards in general, even video games, NFTs, crypto. We talk about a lot of things over there. Mm-hmm. More kind of broader market conversations. But yeah, so one thing we think we're going to probably do is maybe do one of these every month or so, kind of live, where we just hang out with people on this channel. And you all can let us know if you'd like that. Hey, you say Booyah and Jody and Rock, they do some of the usual people. So do we want to start with a couple questions, Chris, that were asked on our last video on Collect and Spec?
I'll be honest with you. I got to pull them up. I got distracted because Jake and I were actually for about 45 full minutes before this discussing deep philosophical things, which he actually had to rip me out of. I would have done that all night. If anybody watches if anybody in here actually watches our old episodes of the Pocket Change, the altruism debate came up, and I was having a blast. So. Just give me 1 second. I'll pull up some questions from our most recent cast, and we'll address those.
Go for it. No rush. I think people are just sort of finding it. So one thing, I have not made a video in a couple of weeks because I have been sick, unfortunately, but doing a little bit better now. Not COVID, luckily. Tested negative for that. So, but yeah, as part of why we also wanted to do this live, just to get some content out there for people who like this channel. Yeah.
I feel like Zakil intentionally dodges questions that address him and his life choices. We're gonna have to find a couple.
Should we answer on Zakil's behalf?
Oh God, I am so unprepared and ill-equipped to do it. I'm so down. Hold on. Let's see here.
I guess the other thing we normally start with, and I guess we could do that as you sort of look for questions, is just talk about what we're seeing, what we're sort of doing in these markets right now. Anything going on with you and what you're sort of seeing and doing in the TCG world?
Yeah. So truth be told, I am fully gearing. I am fully bracing for what I think is going to be a hard retrace and just the overall marketplace. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm largely moving the bulk of my position towards servicing the Japanese marketplace. The staples and the things that I'm moving into are playable cards that I know the Japanese market is going to really want as soon as play can come back. And I know that those prices are still suppressed in NA. So I mean, I had a 5K order just yesterday night. I was like, oh, woo. And I was doubling down on something I did 3 or 4 months ago because it's just like, I'm that confident. And like, I know mana drains are going to be very popular in Japan, and I know the sexiest version is going to be what they want. So I'm going to dive even deeper on them. So that's where I'm at right now, because I think the collector bit of the market is just, as PSA returns come back, as just markets slow down, come back to reality, I want to be in as secluded and as protected a position as I can be in, so that my business continues to grow and continues to operate. Um, and I operate largely off buy lists. These are things I can never say, so this is so liberating. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I definitely don't know what's going to happen. Is the market going to retrace further? What parts of the market, whether we're talking about Pokemon or Magic the Gathering or Flesh and Blood or Weiss Schwartz or all the different card games that we look at and watch really carefully. For me, it's all about, because I like collecting and thus sort of more long-term holding and investing and trying to buy things at as low as I possibly can, and hopefully items that are going to go up over time or retain some value. I think for me, it's all about rarity. And, that's been my thing this whole year, but it's just become more and more true. The more risky the market gets, the more I just go to like the rarest items. But that's a very different model, right? Than the buy list, selling things that people are going to really want for the playability, thinking that, okay, so this collectability part of these hobbies is going to get hurt, and so prices are going to come down on that. So I'm going to move towards playability, which I actually think is very logical and makes a lot of sense on the low end. I think on the high end, you want to go to really, really rare items, particularly in hobbies that I think are underappreciated or undervalued. Or items even within the Pokemon hobby, which has tons of eyes on it that then might fit that mold. That is where I would go. So even if you do see some retraces, I think a lot of those items will have very good chances of being more expensive in the long run at some point down the line. I think other items may never recover, to even where they are now. So that's what I would go. So for me, I think it's have fun with the cheap stuff and just like enjoy it. Try to like open some cheap packs, build out some binder. I think now's a really good time to like build out some binder sets, even in Pokemon, with certain cards. You can get it kind of cheap and it's fun. And then for more of that sort of like investment or long-term holds, I would look towards a lot of the stuff I usually talk about, trophies, low pop PSA 10 first edition, WotC, and then some of the other stuff that we talk a lot about, on the Pocket Change podcast that I'm also in outside of the Pokemon market. I try to keep it mostly Pokemon here, but we should definitely do, some MTG while we can. And
I never get to say this. You live on what I would call the knife's edge of just like investment, and just, you need to know everything to do your strategy and to succeed. And you honestly, you clearly have. And it's just, like the amount of effort and time, it always blows my mind, because I always wait for because I do everything with code and programming. I wait for a buy list or a market to basically trigger a flag, and that then tells me to go buy it. But when I wait for a flag to be triggered, that means something's already happened. And if you were there already, you would have made a bundle. But I wait for that to tell me to go in. And you literally gear towards being that first flag. I have no idea how you do it.
I am definitely all about being first to market. That's definitely what I try to do. I'm investing and collecting a lot of things that I ever hear anyone talk about, and I do that with basically there's a lot of work. So I spend a lot of time figuring out what to buy, and then I buy a lot of it very aggressively. And then I don't worry about selling it. I just hold it. and then when if it moves up quite a bit, I might just hold it for the foreseeable future, in part because I really like it and I'm getting at prices that I actually value as a collector. And that's where that collector part comes in, is that I don't think these items are going to be lower than they are now for the foreseeable future. I really want to own them because I really enjoy them, but I also see them as really more enjoyable, potentially higher upside um, stores of value versus putting it in some other things. That's how I try to interact with the market, particularly now. When I was earlier on, I was doing more flipping. But I never did what really you do. I think it's part of why it's fun to talk and it's interesting.
I'm amazed. So when you say you were starting out and you were doing like the flipping, were those like high end like and don't I don't mean to pry, but like was that like 100+ cards that you were flipping?
Mostly what I did is I bought large lots and I graded them. So I looked for large mint lots. I graded all of the cards and then I sold like most of the nines and the eights and I kept the tens. Usually. I also tried to keep a lot of the nines too on better cards. So I would sell some of the lower ones. There were also times where I would get like really great deals, frankly, and I could grade like the 10 best cards from the lot and then just sell the rest raw and make my money back because I would get it far enough under market. So I was doing that sort of thing too. But my goal was never to actually take money out of the hobby. It was always the flipping was only to get more money so that I could put that money back into items that I wanted to hold for the long term and collect for the long term. But I always have the backup of like, I don't need I'm not depending on my collection for life stuff forever. That's my goal. I mean, hopefully I'll never have to, right? So for me, there's the fun of trying to predict the markets and there's the idea of building a valuable collection, which is fun and enjoyable. But there's always that comfort, I guess we could say, of like, I just really, really like this stuff and I'm having a ball, And so I always say that to people that life is a lot more and quality of life is a lot more than just making money, and so you can also enjoy these markets in a way that you really are fundamentally collecting and you're interested in these financial topics because you're just trying to make your money go as far as you possibly can to build the best collection you can, not so much trying to time, know when to sell and how to flip. But I do think these flipping skills and buying and selling skills, unless you have a really large income, can be an amazing tool in your tool belt for you to help grow the collection that you really want. I think a lot of people who are like in my Patreon, for example, are really collectors and are just looking to like, learn about like really cool items that are really fun to collect and try to buy them, at the right, as right at the time as they possibly, can, that sort of thing. A little bit different than I think, what do you think of like your band community? And I imagine most of the guys in there are probably collectors, to some extent. I think most people are collectors to some extent who are involved in this, but you definitely have people who are purely, businesses in band, but also in the hobby. Like what would the breakdown be? And also like, for those who don't know who you are, as more people start to come in, give us a little bit of a synopsis about like what band is and sort of what you do there and all that sort of stuff.
You are so very kind for that, Tio. I truly appreciate you. That's very kind. Um, Ben, honestly, I would say Ben is actually predominantly businesses because that's who I was definitely geared to. Now, so you mentioned this, and I was going to make a point of this from the beginning of 2019 through the end of 2020. Really, only the beginning of this year is when I got away from it. I really relied on sales of MTG for an income.
Yeah.
I was not allowed to reinvest just because of where I was at in life. I'm a little bit younger. But so everything that I was taking, I was basically putting towards bills or rent, or there was a while there where I was paying my entire rent. I lived in Queens, was going straight towards paying my rent, which I hate myself for. And I'm extremely jealous to this day of Zakil because he reinvested all of it. And I'm so jealous. And he started out earlier than me. But to go back to your point about ban, which is again very kind of you, it is largely businesses and just folks who really they want to understand properly, in my opinion, how and I don't mean properly in a way that the market, yeah, but they want to understand how the market works in terms of how does consumer rationale actually work. It's a matter of you can try and collect things, you can try and play the game, but at the end of the day there are people who are supplying you these cards, and there's a strategy and there is an entire logistical chain behind the scenes here of how these cards get to you as the end consumer. And really it's just a conglomeration of all of these people who are largely direct sellers on TCG or eBay, or power sellers there, excuse me, or just larger vendors themselves who are looking for information, looking for data, looking for an understanding of how the marketplace is moving. What do consumers actually, what does the data actually show? What do people actually want? How do I source these things? Which markets, Japan, North America, Europe is the most readily available source of these, and just having a constant communication among these people who really they just need a landing pad more than anything, of just where they can actually speak to each other and communicate has really been what ban is about. And it evolved initially from MTG. We've added Pokemon. We have Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is more active than we give it. That's mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to give it another channel. But that's also part of the reason why I'm bullish on Flesh and Blood. We've got other TCGs going in there too, but it's really a lot of these people who whether I doubt anybody will ever really know who they are, but they move thousands and thousands and thousands of cards from one location to the other, or buying collections, and how to properly and the best way that they can present them to the market.
Yeah. Yeah, you have some big players.
I get so passionate the moment you bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah, it I think that no matter if you're interested in the finances of the hobby and how the hobby works, which is I think is important no matter what sort of tact you're taking, whether it's building a collection or certainly if you're going to be doing more flipping and short term churning your items as quickly as you possibly can. I think understanding what Chris does and understanding how these big players, I don't know if I can say any names. I don't really, or like.
I mean, you can go nuts. They're all there. They all know they're a part of it, and I've mentioned them before, so you're fine.
But big sellers and in the big websites that everyone would know their names, like how their business model runs. I think that can be really valuable to understand how they make their margins. And, I'm very much of the mindset that the winners are these people right now, that I think that the financial winners are going to be people like me. I hope, maybe not, but definitely people like them, because it's sort of a bulletproof. It's so quick moving and that like they're always churning and they're always kind of making that profit, that that really protects you from the downside risk. If the market tanks and goes lower, the worst thing that they're going to do is just remove the buy list, which they can do for things, in panics, but they'll just lower and lower and lower the buy list, and they'll make mistakes and they won't lower it quick enough, and they'll, what have you. And I have taken advantage of some of these bigger stores by going in and buying out a bunch of inventory sometimes when a price change happens, because I will see the price change happen quicker. It's been my experience in Pokemon.
But the store allowed you to buy more than like 4 or 8 copies.
So for example, I bought like 50 cards, PSA cards.
Oh, that's on the store.
Yeah, from a website once. And I just wiped them out. As Pokemon was starting to go up. Yeah.
One of the first things that I created for MTG was an application that looked, and I say I created, I was literally next to the guy when he made it, and he was kind enough to put my name on it for the record. But it was a thing that went out and scraped 80 websites
Yeah.
80 and local game store websites for their inventory. So that way you do
Yeah.
that. But what a lot of game stores for MTG, because I think the market is a little bit more established, is they've set choke points where you can't buy more than 8, even if you want to. And if you come back and you try and buy like 8 multiple times, you can't. And
I
that
mean, I've got all these
ensures.
things in my cart at once.
Yeah,
You
and but so
know?
when you say like you've bought this, you bought a store out for fit, that's on the store. And I know I'm heartless, I'm that
Yeah.
guy, but like if that's a thing that's possible, I would kill for that. Like
I
it
think
just
what's
doesn't
tricky
exist.
from the store's perspective is like I knew the market really well. And so when I started seeing, for example, certain sets go up in value, I knew that like next probably Jungle and Fossil were going to go up and probably the E series.
Mhm.
And so there weren't actually higher sales of some of those cards yet because they were rare. Like this is all quick, right? In
Mhm.
a week, over 2 weeks. So that's how you kind of like the store doesn't even necessarily know because
Mhm.
actually those cards haven't even sold for higher yet. But it's other cards that are similar that have sold for higher. And you can also feel, anyone who was engaged in the hobby, there was this weird thing that happened as the pandemic was going on, which was like there was a lot of like we should be panicking and like probably not putting money into cards, and yet things were going up for
Yeah.
people who were watching closely. And so I felt that surge, and so I got very aggressive, in some of those places. So that's sort of something I don't normally do a lot of. My style, I will take advantage of those things when I see them. I mean, recently I just bought a bunch of like a Weiss Schwartz. I got a good deal on something because I saw that eBay was selling it for a lot higher because they didn't know that a reprint was going to come. And I swooped in and got, some of the reprinted product for much cheaper. So they're like, I do take advantage of some of those information gaps, we could say, kind of like the slowness of some of these bigger places, because they have so much inventory and they sell into so many different markets. They're just not going to be like as up on things as like an individual can be who's just like on discords and message chats and all sorts of things, all the time and is constantly
Mhm.
getting alerts from people. Um, but I think that I'm more in the business of just like finding undervalued items that I believe in, that I really like, and buying them at or slightly under market and holding them when I see them. I think that's would describe 95%, of the cards I bought.
Yeah. It's weird for me because one of the first things that I had to be trained out of was that entire mentality to get into Magic, because
Yeah.
the market is so solidified for that particular area.
Yeah.
Trying to outthink the market, it's such a thing of the past. Like 10 years ago, maybe. 15 years ago, sure. Now, no, because there's 25 of me's out there. But I am so of the mind that if people embrace, if the entire TCG, CCG industry embraced the internet, and then in maybe 5 years code, this it wouldn't happen. But I'm a nerd. But I really, it's like it's not a matter, because you talk about when something is going to spike and you have this person, you have this advantage. There are so many safeguards that a market can have to protect against that, or so many indicators that they can have to try and be up there with you. And even though it's not perfect, it's not a human, that would be something that they could do. So for me, it just feels so much like like oil town, boom town logic of trying to get there before everybody else. But what do you do after it's established? And I feel like my entire strategy has been around, I'm coming to an established town and they're going to know me, and I need to have like a good reputation. I need to have all of this. And I also need to know that there's a market rate and I need to buy at the market rate and look presentable, buy at the market rate. It looks crazy while I do it, and then 6 months later I'll sell it back to you at double. That's been my entire strategy. So I have no idea how you do what you do. I am constantly amazed, but it was one of those things where, because of where I started out, I don't know, I never got good at it because I always lost. I'll be very candid about that on camera. I mean, I lost a ton of money trying to outsmart the market, and I was like, you know what? I need to take a more formulaic approach to this, and that was really successful for me. But um,
Yeah. I mean, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's simple though, in the sense that it's all supply and demand.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean? And so
Oh, yes.
everything, yes, it's sort of like trying to outsmart the market, but it's really just understanding supply and demand. So, for example, I
Everything.
knew that everyone should sell their celebrations cards as quickly as they possibly could over this last week. And Dan Ketchum Collectibles, we were on like the Discord the other night, and he opened some product early and was able to sell a lot of those cards for like $50 to $100, and it was like there's like the odds of this maintaining the price are almost nothing because of how easy all of these cards are to pull. The fact that no product is yet out on the market, right? So there are things that it's sort of like these sort of obvious supply and demand factors. I think the further you get out in the future, the harder the demand part is to predict. The supply part, though, the rarity part is what I love. But the demand part is like tastes change, right? There's
YouTubers'
risks.
content changes.
YouTubers' content changes, people's interest changes. And so all of that stuff, again, it's just, you just take a risk when you buy something that has no function outside of like people enjoy it and it's a store of value. You run the risk of people's taste changing, people's attention, shifting to something else. So I think, but in terms of, trying to outsmart the market or this or that, there's just a lot of there's a lot of incorrect information. There's a lot of opinions that aren't based on supply and demand principles. There are a lot of items and products that I don't think make a lot of sense at their current supply and demand. I don't think their prices make as much sense as other things. And it's not, but some of those things I'll probably be right about. Some of those things I'll probably be wrong about, and we'll have to see how it goes. A lot of it too was just luck of when I started doing it. I've been covered, like everything I've done has turned to gold because of when I started doing it. So there's also that element of like, what does it look like in a down period? And I'm going to be losing money across the board on all my items, right? In a down period, which ones are going to go down the most? Am I going to, go down, but not as much as some other items or other people, or my items going to go down even more? So all of that will be learning experiences for me on how these markets work. But studying other markets, studying price patterns and behavior in other markets. That's how you like it's first of all, there's so many people who are so bullish on Pokemon who don't know anything about any of these other card markets, let alone knowing anything about the high-end art market or, different antiques and books and coins. And some people who, I just had a discussion about this today in Discord, who like really look down and they're like, like all like nobody likes coins and art. And like our whole generation's only going to like cards. And it's like, first of all, wrong. Like there are plenty of people, who like these things, and will continue to like these things. And these items have historical aspects to them that likely are going to allow their demand is a little bit safer. It's a little bit actually less risky. Whereas right now, the demand of these IPs is so dependent on this current generation and the next generation and the next generation still loving this stuff and wanting this stuff and wanting specifically cards, that all of that are sort of demand risks. And it's great until it isn't. And when you study hobbies that die, it's the same song. So the way you protect yourself is buying the rarer stuff at lower prices, if and diversifying across a number of different things and buying what you really enjoy and like, so that when it goes down, you're still a happy person and you still have a solid quality of life. It really, yeah. Like I just fall back on this principles. So I am literally asking, like every time I purchase things, right? I'm like, I go through my list, particularly in an environment like this, whereas a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was like, I want to buy everything. I just don't have enough money. Like I was literally like every spare dollar would go into everything because it felt so cheap. I had a very different response this year where it was like, okay, like the hurdles that we need to get over to actually buy an item in this type of market need to be really high.
I'm so jealous. Like again, this is something I actively trained myself out of, was just that I used to see something and I feel passionate about it. I was like, I'd love to own that. And then I'd get stuck with it for a year and it was expensive. And then I had to out it at a massive loss.
Yeah.
And now I've reached a point in my psyche where I'll look at a card and I'll be like, I don't care about it, but I'll buy it and I'll own it and I'll move it. And I know this makes me heartless, but this is just where I'm at. And this is honestly, this is why I like things like when I discover Zed Run, the NFT. I'm still very passionate about that. I still have exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about. When I look at Flesh and Blood, I still have exactly what you're talking about. However, once I find a successful model to base it off of, I really have to separate myself from that to be like, okay, what are the odds this is going to succeed? And if I hold it, it's not a matter of I like it and I'm passionate about it because of my position. And I think your advice is way better for the casual investor, 100%. But for where I'm at, it's always like, okay, what is the impact to me going to be? Am I going to buy a bunch of $300 cards that I'm going to have to potentially sell off at 150? Because that's really bad. Or is the impact, okay, this could go up, $50, but it could only go down $10. And that's where I live now.
And I think even more problematic is lack of liquidity in items that I buy. So I think, because I actually think that I don't feel the items that I'm buying are actually as risky price wise over time. But I do think liquidity, in terms of churn rate, in terms of finding buyers in any market, that's where you could get into some difficulty, where it could become very difficult to find a buyer for a certain item in a certain market. And so that's something that's where, if you're a business or if you're churning, you're really a day trader, type of, momentum investor. You want to go where the hype is, where the movement is, where the money can be made. The danger with that is if you're early or late. and like everyone who was late this year got hammered. Everyone who was early made a fortune. And that's true for Flesh and Blood and Pokemon, and might be true. We'll see what happens with MetaZoo, but all these types of things, right? So that's the danger.
I've been trying to teach this since when I began, or when I began ban. It's just a price point and just in a solid point of time means nothing. Don't look at eBay most recent sales and see that it's sold for this and think, oh, that's what I can get. That is just the wrong logic. That is just, it will only get you into trouble. What you need to look at is time series. And I'm a huge time series nerd, and I think time series are the coolest thing ever. But that stems from my origination from TCGs, wherein you need to look at what has it done over the past month? What has it done over the past week, even 3 days? You need to look at what it's doing over time. Singular data points mean nothing. They mean absolutely nothing. Anybody can be bored and make a wrong purchase, or just make a purchase that, they looked at the market 3 months ago and they didn't re-educate themselves and they'll buy it now because they think it's still where it's at. That doesn't mean things are recovering. The slope always matters more than individual data points. What you're mentioning there, Jake, just kind of triggered me on that. And Jet, when you look at these price points and you look at whether you want to get involved or not, you have to look at movement, because that will save you 9 times out of 10. And it's such a simple, basic strategy. But
Yep.
literally just look at how it's moving. And if you can predict the movement up, that's wonderful. That's great. But it also helps you to look at it and say, okay, I remember this being $3,000. It's 25. But then if you look at the slope, they're all going down. You don't want to be on that ship. You want to be on this ship. And I have so many algorithms that I've designed that are totally built around trying to detect up, 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 up.
Yeah.
And literally it's that simple.
Yeah. And for me, like, I'm interested in both because I'm interested in the trends because I'd like to buy low. And if I am going to sell high. So you do have to be sort of aware and within a window, but I'm more interested in the long-term, trajectory, which doesn't matter. It's more about the fundamentals of the asset, the stock, the whatever, and less about what people feel about it at right this moment, or even what the price is. And so but it's risky to try to predict that. That's hard. And yeah, I don't think it's for everyone. I think it's also, you can do both. You can try both and do some of both. But
Yeah.
anything more you want to add to that before maybe we do some questions and maybe go to the chat a little?
I'm a big fan of just ignore. I mean, if people don't like it, that's the best time to buy. The louder and more vocally people dislike something or don't or disagree with it, it's like it's the best time to do something because that means they're
If
not
it's a
buying
good
it.
item, if it's a
What's that?
fundamentally good item, right?
Yes, exactly. But even if it's not, to your point, even if it's a fundamentally rare item, if it's
Yeah.
just rare, it doesn't even need to be the sexiest item. But if everybody hates it and they don't want it, guess what? There's going to be extremely few of open, and that's an opportunity. And I feel like that is something that I've hit over and over and over and over and over again. As soon as I see people hating or dogpiling on something, I was like, I'm buying it again and again. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and what that is you're looking for a rationality in a market. So
Yeah.
you are trying to outsmart, we can say, the market. So you're saying, okay, there's a rational negativity here. I view this item and I say it's much better item than, maybe it's not the perfect item, but it's a better item than the market saying. And I think there are people right now who feel that way about modern Pokemon. There's certainly
Mhm.
people who felt that way about a year and a half ago, and they've been very right and made a lot of money by buying a bunch of those modern booster boxes. There are people who still feel that way. We'll see where it goes from here. But there are always going to be people who have their thesis that, like, oh, people are overly negative, overly positive. And I think that's where value investors come in. That's the value investor process versus the
Mhm.
hype momentum investor process, which is that process of, I don't have an opinion. I don't even know anything about this. Let's look at the dumb money guys, right? Are you familiar with them and how they got into like Pokemon? And so
I'm
dumb money, I'm sure a number of people in the chat are. So dumb money, they are basically social arb investors. So basically they look at trends, social trends, what people are talking about. So they don't understand why Charizard or Pokemon or why anyone cares about any of this stuff, but they saw that a lot of people did and were talking about it. So they wanted to jump in on it. Okay.
so
So that it's that sort of idea of, I don't understand why people like this, but they obviously do because I have the numbers, and so I'm going to jump in on it. Now the danger of that is you could jump in at the height and not know it because
dumb money. Gotcha.
you know and so the dumb money is a YouTube channel. They call themselves
Okay. Okay. I was like, okay, it makes sense. If you have a lot of money to spend and you don't care what it happens if it goes up or down and you're not
yeah.
following it. Okay.
So, I mean, they've been, you know, at least what they say, and I assume they're telling the truth. I mean, I have no reason to doubt them. I don't know any of them, but have made like $50 million or something, in the last 5 to 10 years using this sort of social arb strategy. Now, part of that might be because they got into an insane, incredible bull run and bought extremely risky things because they're hype, investors, and it happened to work out. And a lot of that could be luck, and it could have had the very opposite effect in a different type of market. That's a whole nother thing for a different discussion, sort of the positives and negatives. This is stuff that's argued about a lot because sort of momentum investors have actually outpaced and done better, and growth stock investors have actually outpaced and done better than value investors in recent years. So there's a lot, but then it depends which value investor, which momentum investor, et cetera. The point is there's merit in all of these things, but you have to understand how it works. And so you're not the sheep who is the bad value investor or the sheep who's the bad, because you could take value investing and be very wrong. Like if you have very bad information and you think that something's very undervalued or you think something's very rare, but it isn't, So it's just thinking correctly. You actually have to have accurate data, which then it means you really have to be engaged in the market and talk to trustworthy people.
Not
Et
to
cetera, et cetera.
not to derail you too much, but
Yeah.
I would probably be a proponent of there's no form of profitable investment in this market anymore outside of momentum investment.
You think so? I think outside of the very rare items, I agree. I don't think that it makes any sense with PSA, this backlog that we have no idea exactly what's in there and how much is left. It just doesn't make sense to be investing, in my opinion, at this point, in like PSA 7, PSA 8 WotC first edition hollow, like or PSA 10 Jungle first edition EV. Like it's not, there's just too much still to come back, or any sort of modern PSA card. So now there might become a point where those things are value investable for like a lower income. Like, for example, I bought hundreds and hundreds of rainbow rares a few years ago from the Sun and Moon era that I bought for like $1 to $5 each, depending on the rainbow rare, because I bought them in large quantity and then graded a bunch of them. And then I was also buying like the PSA 9s for like $10 each. If that happens again with some of these eras, those are the price points where I'd be more attracted to. It might never happen again. Prices may never come down to that point, but they might. And so that's where you get into like, is there good value there? From my perspective, I agree with you, Chris. I don't think the upside, let me put it this way. I think that because of that, we don't know how much supply is going to be there, and we don't know if demand is really going to stay in Pokemon as much as it is right now. Those two reasons make those items too risky. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do well and they're not going to go up, and they might end up being really good investments. But I would steer away from them because of those two things in the short term. In the long term, though, and I've said this in some of my modern investing videos, if there's a price for everything, or for most things, where it starts to make more sense, and you might see that rebound, particularly at Pokemon, and I'm very bullish on it in the long term, really does become this juggernaut for 10 to 30 years, 10 to 20 to 30 years. We're going to see ups and downs within that, but that overall it becomes this sort of strong established market that goes up, where we see that up kind of through line, even if there are rocky periods.
I don't want to hurt you. If you need to get more tea, please do.
Sorry,
I'm what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
People can hate me from my own territory. Is I want to see a reserved list kind of mentality around certain items, and the fact that certain items are treated differently from the rest of the market, and they aren't touched. They're not, even if they're reprinted and they're the same, you still respect the original items and you still treat them in a different way. So that's what I'm trying to discover with Pokemon. But just given the massive volatility, and honestly, I truly think the implosion of grading on the scene, I think grading is changing everything. I think Pokemon was the kind of the body that carried the armor. I'm terrible at metaphors. I always do this. But I think grading is just the biggest thing to TCG since sliced bread. And I think their impact is going to be a ripple effect across the entire industry. And I think if you were ahead of the curve with knowing that it was going to hit with Pokemon, you made a bundle, and you can still make a bundle probably. But like I think that still exists for the rest of the TCGs. And I think that's why so many people are bullish on like MetaZoo and Flesh and Blood. It's because just grading showing up and just being accepted by everybody. That's where I think the true, like, that's the biggest thing that came out of this. I love that Pokemon has imploded onto the scene, but for me, where I sit, I look at grading, I'm like, that's the thing. That's just carrying the industry forward right now.
I think what's two things I think would be interesting to talk about maybe before we jump into questions.
Sorry, I distracted you. I'm sorry.
No. This is what it's like when Chris and I talk. It's just, we love these subjects.
It really is.
So I'm very interested in two things. Okay. Let's do a little Magic the Gathering versus Pokemon conversation here. Okay. So two things I'm very interested in.
I'm a Leafs fan. I'm ready for this. You know what that means.
One is understanding why Magic the Gathering modern booster boxes have always done much better than Pokemon until right now, and trying to understand that concept. Because Magic the Gathering, you would see appreciation on the majority of boxes. You'd have boxes like Dragon's Maze and certain sets that had poor playability, or people didn't enjoy as much, not struggle to move up. But for example, in Pokemon, everything from the Sun and Moon era for 4 straight years didn't appreciate at all, didn't go up in value at all. Same with a number of the second half of the XY sets that were printed more in demand. So during that period, you didn't have that growth. Now you have, and maybe I'll start throwing some points out, and then maybe you can respond. But so then we have this period where there's so many new Pokemon collectors and there's so many new Pokemon investors. And all of a sudden, I think really for the first time, people started hoarding modern Pokemon product that I don't think ever really happened before. And I wonder, I guess my question to you is why? So I think it was all, I think in large part, I don't know how much, but I do think that all of the hoarding of the product and all of the opening, because it was so exciting and investing, lots of people came in. We don't know how much depleted the supply and all these opening channels and all the people opening, across the country and the world. We also don't know how many people just have this in their apartment, in their flat, wherever. We know a lot more than any time in human history. I would guarantee you that any time in human history, there is more sealed Pokemon products sitting in people's houses than ever before. There's almost zero, of that before this period. So how do you think that compares to Magic? Why do you think that Magic booster boxes have always, or most of them, or a number of them, and correct me if any of this is wrong, have sort of slowly appreciated, some a little bit more sharply, but generally kind of slowly appreciated over time? Yeah. What are your thoughts on all of it?
Oh, I'm gonna prefix this by saying I think, and I'm biased, I think Magic the Gathering is sexy. In case you wanted to know who I'm gonna declare the winner here, the thing that I like about Magic is that there's a purpose when somebody buys it. They're not hoarding it. There is an intent to open it for a reason, which tells me there's an organic demand there. There is an organic desire from consumers to open it. Now, to your point of saying, why do I think Pokemon had surpassed? First of all, I think Pokemon's potential is dramatically larger than Magic. Their IP is way better. I mean, it's Pokemon versus Magic the Gathering. I think we can all agree Pokemon dwarfs them, and that's being kind to Magic.
Yeah.
And I think at the same time as this was happening, Magic the Gathering was also experimenting with how to be honest with you, how to properly profitize their existing consumer base. So they went from 20 years of growth on a consumer base that wanted a TCG. Pokemon, the TCG was always auxiliary, and they went to an experimental model of how can we best profit off of our consumers. So they were cannibalizing their own business at the same time that this happened. They would think it was accidental and it was coincidental, but it happened. And now you have Pokemon going above it. But as you said, you have a bunch of people storing Pokemon product in their closet. I don't think there's anybody in this world who's fairly in the know who's going to argue otherwise. And that makes me incredibly fearful from investing in Pokemon for anything long term, for anything modern. And I will make that distinction for anything modern, for anything older, 10, 15, 20 years back, you're a lot safer. But I think that is something that in my mind is just a huge red flag that I can never get past. I think that is just something that Magic the Gathering, it's going to appreciate slowly because as people find it and they haven't opened it, they're going to list it. Whereas Pokemon, if you bought it, you bought it with the intent of storing it. And then you are going to have at a certain point, whether it's now, 5 years, I don't know when it's going to be, but eventually people are going to bring these items to the market with the expectation of a payoff. And if they don't get a payoff, they're at least going to want to recoup their money. And depending on the amount of people that did this, which it seems rather large, and that to me is the gamble. It might not be that large. It might just be our perception that a lot of people did this and they didn't. But my understanding is they did. And when that happens, it's going to be a ferocious battle to the bottom. And when the rest of this particular's, Pokemon's TCG, they see this, everybody else is going to be like, oh shit, it's going to zero. We need to list everything we have. And then you're going to see a massive race to the bottom because so many people try. It's a balloon. Everybody tried to get ahead of it. And now they're all going to lose together at the same time due to mass psychology of, well, we're all trying to win. Oh crap, we're all losing. I want to lose less. I want to lose less. I want to lose less. And then it's just, which side do you want to be on? Which worries me. But that's why I'm more on the side of Magic, because that they're established, and even though they're trying weird shit right now, to be honest with you, they know that their consumers are coming for this, and they're buying it with the intent to use. Pokemon, they're buying with the intent to store.
Yeah, I can see both sides of this debate. I think that, so for example, like I spent last night, like I was buying some like Looney Tunes fun, like baseball, like some fun boxes. I was buying some like upper deck stuff, some top stuff, baseball, football, $5 to $10 a booster box, these types of prices. So even with all of the mania and all of the growth this year, right, there's so much of that supply and there's just not nearly enough demand for it, even with the growth and even with people starting to grade some cards from these sets. So the difference with Pokemon can be a couple of things. One, it's just so much more immensely popular. And we just don't know how popular, and we don't know how popular it could be. And so the amount that's being printed now may be not nearly enough. This is the pro argument. May be not nearly enough. And so all of these sets are going to be quite a bit more expensive. And even though a ton of people are hoarding them and holding them, because there's going to be new generations coming in, and because those boxes are going to be old, and because most of the people can afford to hold those items and be slow and kind of slowly sell them onto the market, I think that it's not crazy to be like those boxes hit $200-$300 in 5 to 10 years, which would, I think, slightly outpace Magic on average. Slightly.
Who are they selling them to?
They'd be selling them to people who just opened and didn't actually keep a sealed box, and who want a sealed box for their collection, or to kind of open and reminisce, or 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who now have money to buy these sets and they remember them. But it's all very dependent on collectability. It's not playability, because they're going to be, I don't think I don't see the Pokemon game getting so big that there aren't enough already open like cards from these sets that, to go around, particularly because how many people are actually playing cards from that generation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's possible. I also see what you're talking about potentially happening, where it becomes like these boxes that people are buying like at $150, $160, $170 go back down to like 80. I think like if they're going down to 50, 40, 30, 20, then you're talking more about like Pokemon's in trouble. Like then I think it's about more of a universal issue. But I think if that goes back to like 80, and you have to sell, like you bought it at 170 and then you have to dump it at 80, 90, and it sits there for years and there are tons of them on there.
So my issue is not so much that, sorry, I have to I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. The issue is not so much the impact of like everybody listing at once. It's that the entire Pokemon market has to solve its liquidity. How do you liquidate your item? Because it was a mad scramble before and it was nothing but cash flow and it was amazing and it was paradise. What is the how I mentioned, I enter a town and it's already established. What is the established town for Pokemon going to be? Because there are a ton of people hoarding this item, and I honestly, I don't expect it to be that like $150 items are going down to 80. I'm expecting somebody to list for 120, then somebody's going to undercut them for 110, $100. Okay, when does that end? And at what point will it cause mass calamity on a broad scale, which is a huge claim that I know I'm making, but I worry about it because I see the race to the bottom happening with a lot of people saying it. So it's not that things are going to magically go from one to the other.
I think going back to the sports analogy, so the other big difference, right, is that Topps, Upper Deck, there were a million different companies making the rookie Griffey card that year, or and then there were a million sets, and there were some sets in some years that had like no good rookies that nobody wanted, and there were a million boxes produced, and then you had 7 different companies, right, making those boxes, and then you had the Looney Tunes variation, and this variation, and then that variation, and I don't like. It's hard to compare that to Pokemon. Like, how much is Pokemon printing right now? And in Patreon, we actually went over what we think and used some data that we've acquired. But And I would actually say the numbers if I don't remember them. I don't have them off the top of my head, but we talked about some of these sets and how much we think is probably being printed, and trying to compare that and look back to some of the numbers that were, discussed and printed in like the 90s and 80s in some of these hobbies, or like comics and these alternative art comics and all sorts of things that were made that crashed that market. It's just so hard to know. It's that demand piece. It's just like, how much demand is there going to be? Is it going to grow? Is it going to go up? And it goes to your point too. Who are you going to sell it to? And that's the demand question. Who doesn't have one? Who wants it? Who's going to want it for $300 more than they could buy it right now? Right? It's this type of question. It's like, how many people are going to be like, shoot, like, oh man, I could have bought that evolving box at 170, and now that it's at 500, I like really want it and I'll buy it. And I think that we saw that sort of reaction this year, and that sort of behavior tends to be signs of like bubble and mania, because people are so afraid that they're going to miss out and that it's going to keep going up, and or they want to make money, and so they want to buy it as it goes up, and that causes it to kind of go up and up and up. Those are signs of risk.
Yeah.
The more that's happening, the more people that are holding the item actually want to flip it, the less people are making that decision to open it or engage with it as a collector or a player. And I just don't know where all of that ends up. So my perspective on all of this is too risky for me, because I see other things I'd prefer. And for that price point, there's just so much more I would enjoy. But I'm not a firm like, we'll go down or we'll go up type of guy. What I get upset about, or what I come out about, which is I think why people have some certain people who don't watch the channel, I think that much, have sort of like not really understood where I'm coming from, is that I'm very anti the channels and the people telling people that these are sure things and that these are great and they're the best things to buy. And I'm very against that. I cringe really hard, because it's like,
Before you go on this tangent, do you mind if I just cut in real quick? Because I want to address what you've said already, and that's you identified the demand bit, and that is honestly why I think that MetaZoo and Flesh and Blood are both doomed for failure. And I meme a lot about Flesh and Blood because there's a lot of money to make there right now, but it really is to exactly what you just said. It's who are you selling it to is the most important thing. And the reason why I like Flesh and Blood over MetaZoo right now is that everybody buying MetaZoo is buying it for collecting and not for any kind of use. And I'll be very upfront about this. I don't understand the collector's market. And Jake, you've mentioned this too. You only buy into a market you understand. But I understand Flesh and Blood in that you want to buy it to remove it from the marketplace to play it potentially. That is the ideal goal. And the fact that that is their goal, I respect that. Now, the high-end items, I'm never going to touch because they're all treating that like base alphas right now, which is hilarious. They're all going to lose money. They're all going to lose money. I will go down in history saying they're all going to lose money off of what they did. Because they're tampering with the fundamentals of how the marketplace works, hoping they'll get lucky. And you can't do that in the way that they're doing it and succeed.
So I think that don't underestimate collectability. And collectability, although potentially somewhat dangerous, playability is risky too. Someone can really like to play a game and then stop liking it and move on. So it's not like players are going to be like necessarily more lifetime players than a person who collects isn't going to be a lifetime collector. That'd be an interesting study to look at, like, do players have, higher stickiness rates versus collectors, and what that actually looks like.
Love to work on that.
Yeah, super interesting, right? But I think that, and first of all, a lot of people are both, and that's a whole nother thing. But I think that definitely the collectability seems to have the higher end, or the high side. Although in Magic, it's sort of like, well, the Alpha Black Lotus and the Power 9 from Alpha are the most expensive cards because of playability, also because people had a playability connection to them. Maybe, they were the strongest, right? So in Magic, it becomes a little bit more of like, because so many people came to that game and connected to that as a game and not the IP.
Yeah.
It wasn't a fire breathing dragon that was really strong and had, high hit points, even though it was a terror. Like Charizard was a bad, was not a playable card, and yet it became the card that everyone wanted to collect and have the highest value, versus Magic, where it's a little bit more confusing.
Even Dragon doesn't have the same effect.
The one thing that I think is odd to me about the Magic community is I don't think the conversation around playability and collectability makes any sort of sense. And what I mean by that is like there's so much negativity, and we started to see this in the Pokemon hobby too. And it's a shame, because it's just honestly it's really stupid. Like there's so much negativity towards people who want to collect the items and enjoy them just by putting them in a binder and looking at them, or even not looking at them and just having them and enjoying having them. And there's so much like moral superiority from people who like, these are meant to be played, and that's the only connection we should have with them. That to me is very odd. And I get it from like a selfish perspective of like, we want everyone like these collectors are making it so I can't get the items to play, and that's frustrating. Absolutely. But how about like if there were tons of players and I wanted to collect, would I be of the right to say, and then it gets into these questions of like, well, the Pokemon company and the Magic company made this as a game, not to collect, and it's like, well, certainly the Pokemon company isn't doing that. Why do you think they're making rainbow rares and all these variations? Certainly FAB isn't doing that. And now certainly Magic isn't doing that, right? Magic is clearly trying to appeal to collectibility,
but they're still basing it on a game, and Flesh
so
and Blood is still basing it on a game.
Yeah. And so it's like, for me, it's like, it's first of all, it's limiting the community and limiting the enjoyment. And to me, it's like, it's cool that anyone appreciates these things in any sort of way and has any sort of shared connection. So one, I don't like it from like a community perspective, and sort of the anger and the negativity and like, who's the good one, who's the bad one. I don't like that. Second, from a financial perspective, and this is the part where maybe playable people would be more upset, but I think collectors too. Collectors don't like high prices either, because they want their cards to collect. It's not just about money too. So there's a little bit more shared there than I think some players actually realize. But there's this thing of like, the fact that like Magic the Gathering modern cards can't be graded or aren't graded, or there isn't a big grading scene. Very interesting, right? For some of like the cooler looking arts, the cool looking full arts, the cool looking characters.
Manu Lily, I'll never grade mine.
It's very interesting. And I saw this in other TCGs and CCGs that I've studied, where there were a number of people who were like, why would you ever put that in plastic? It was almost like they're angry that you're taking a card, so like we can't feel it or touch it anymore. And to me, it's sort of it's not like everyone is entitled to their opinion. Although I think that it's like, have you ever held a modern card? Have you ever tried to collect? Yeah, I do feel a little bit of that towards some of those people of like, maybe like try it before you knock it and see if you like it. It just be me being like, playing all this stuff is stupid, even though I haven't tried it that much, I
think Magic has built, I think Magic is an anomaly. And to your point, in that when people come down from their mountain and say that, you're crazy for doing what you're doing. See, yeah, because they're the anomaly and they don't realize they're the anomaly, and that they see the game first with sports cards, with Pokemon. And I would say even mostly probably with Yu-Gi-Oh, although I'm speaking a bit out of my ass there. I apologize for the swearing. But it's more for the IP logo and the viewing and the addition and the rarity. You don't have that at all with Magic, which I think provides a really cool basis, because when Magic came out,
it have rares though. They could have made.
Sure. You have rares, you have mythics, but mythics aren't even the most valuable items.
Doesn't matter though. They could have just not had rares, commons, and uncommons if they truly wanted zero collectability. And there are plenty of TCGs and CCGs that do that. So I just want to point it out there. This isn't an argument against you, but just to Magic people, that it's like there's a reason why Power 9 is also more valuable, and that's because there are less of them too. The rare cards.
No, there's definitely collectability in the game for sure, and I get what you're saying, and there's a lot of people who won't address it, but Magic has built an anomaly around the fact that it is a game first in a way that no other card game has. And part of what I like still about Magic the Gathering, and I think Flesh and Blood is trying to recreate this. I don't think they will, but I love that they're trying. Is just that when they came out, they were a game with satanic symbols and things that parents didn't like and that the community thought was a terrible card game. There were 18 different card games. And even right now, you have all of these things around how like collectability is the biggest thing. And they're the one outlier saying, no, just be a game first. And that to me, I'm biased clearly, but I think they have the greatest potential for growth out of all of them based off of that. The fact that they are so strongly rooted off of what should be their weakest point versus all others in the area. And because everybody else is an IP who has built and said their story and they're largely done and this is where they're at. And now what do we do? They've built it from this. They could build anything from here and succeed and grow. And that to me makes them the most bullish place that I want to be. But again, that's where I came from. So I'm very biased, but that's my logic and I'll dive by it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I was so the biggest market is sports.
Because sports is generational.
All collectability, right? So before this year, or now it's like a year and a half, whatever it's been, 2 years almost. I don't even know, who knows anymore. But I looked at these games and I said, wow, Pokemon is so undervalued because it has by far the highest IP, because our generation is so connected with it, because Magic is older, already has more money into it. Like all the demographics were pro Pokemon, the size of the IP was pro Pokemon, and the collectability and connection that people had in that sort of sense, and with grading taking off, it was all in Pokemon's side. Pokemon has, way outgrown and outpaced Magic, over the last 2 years, even though Magic's done very well too, overall. Pokemon has grown and ballooned and gotten so much more attention and garnered so much more interest than Magic has this year, all across from modern to vintage. Now, where do we go from here? That we're trying to talk about. That's the conversation we're trying to have right now. I don't know. When we talk about what has like higher upside, I think Magic going in this more collector direction is interesting. I do think that them partnering with IPs and, making and Secret Layer and these other sort of products they're doing, like I think that it's trying to grow that out and appeal to that sort of thing, which I do think will certainly increase the interest potentially. I don't know, if Magic becomes a bit like Weiss, where they're kind of partnering each set with a different IP. I don't think Magic will ever do that, but if they start moving more towards that direction, I think that I genuinely don't know. It'll be very interesting to see how that does versus just like a more kind of pure, straightforward Pokemon and the IP around that. Now, another thing I do think to think about is that it's an age group thing too. I think one thing that really held back Pokemon, and the thing when I started investing into Pokemon, the thing I was most worried about is it was too childish. It was that adults would feel uncomfortable collecting these cards. And then Magic had sort of like darker symbols and darker ideas. And
I told you before, right? My father, who said, of all the things that you like, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, the dumbest thing was that pocket monster thing that you like.
So I think that, but I offset that with like how much we just really love this stuff and how important it was in our childhood, and how connected we are to these art, and then the quality, because I think Pokemon cards, like, and the vintage stuff and the art style, I just think it's such high quality. Mm-hmm. I think Magic has really high quality too. I think a lot of these games, I think FAB really high quality. MetaZoo is an interesting discussion whether or not that's high quality. It's going to get some firing different opinions, but yeah, go ahead.
I think right now, because you mentioned sports before, and the thing when I said when sports is transgenerational is a father or mother will train the daughter, son, whatever it is, to like the same sport they do. And that is an inbuilt cycle in people that the game itself doesn't have to do. So it's very easy to supply them with collectibles. When you get to games like or shows or IPs like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, you have to constantly train the audience to be interested. And what I think Pokemon has done a tremendous job of is actually being transgenerational. I can see the next buyer today in 20 years for something that's Pokemon. And I think Pokemon is the best IP for that as it stands now. And I don't think there's any competition, and I don't think
That's
there will be.
and that's why I compare it to things like comic books and
Yeah.
and sports cards. Although I think comic books, your weakness is the comic part. Interestingly, it's part of why I'm going back and investing or collecting or specking or a combination of all on some of these characters on cards, right? Because I do think that the comic books might be a little bit of a past generation thing. Now people still really like comic books at our age, but I think it's not as obvious, even though comics have always been tied to those characters as being the most valuable collectibles. Just like cards are tied to Pokemon, cards are tied to sports and memorabilia with sports, and cards are certainly all is Magic the Gathering.
Jake, you're very kind. I will take the flack on this. Comic books are dying. I will full out just say
I mean,
I think the time for them is done. But again, I'll take that on the chin
yeah,
myself. That's on me. But I think it's just a fact of the way that our culture is growing and where it's moving. And that's fine. That's okay.
yeah.
That is what it is. Now, I'm not saying the time for them is done right now, but moving forward, we're moving away from that. So if you're still focused on that, I would say embrace other collectibles. Come at me. I'm willing to take it. I have one social media outlet. You can let me have it. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying um, to be mean here, but to move it towards to back towards
I don't
collectibles.
I don't quite agree. Let me just respond to that quickly, and then we'll keep going. So I think that um, with these grading companies starting to grade individual pages, particularly with comic books where it's very art based, where there's actual pictures, and it's not just owning like a book that without pictures, these types of
I
things.
hadn't thought of that. I
Like
hadn't
it,
thought of that.
it is very card like, and it's very art like, and you can hang it up on the wall and other sorts of things. So I think that like there's stuff there. And then when we talk about like vintage books, they're doing that with books too. And there are lots of old books that have amazing illustrations. Then there's sort of like, I do think that these things can be cyclical. And I think that even like in the digital age and people are moving away from books, I think that you might find a generation who goes back to book. So I think that it's just very hard to predict that sort of thing. I do think though that comics are very expensive and cards are very cheap. And I don't agree with that.
No,
So
no, I think you've properly
it was
schooled me.
more it was more that for me. It wasn't so much like one thing I think is definitely going to win out or is better. I don't believe in that sort of like I think that people get very and this isn't necessarily a criticism on you, although
No,
you can
no, please, because
if
I
it
made the mistake.
applies to you or not. But I think that people get we have a tendency of sort of being in our bubble of like what we like and thinking that like that's what everyone likes and what everyone's going to like. And I think that when you're collecting and investing in these spaces, spend time in like coin collecting forums and spend
Yes,
time in different art and antique forums and
learning
get
a
a
different
sense.
language.
Yeah. It can really help you have more context for the hobby that you're in and how it's viewed by maybe the broader trade. And I think that can help you figure out is it cheap, is it expensive? And so I think that cards went through like very cheap, like non-sports cards to me were very cheap, and now they're in a much more relatively not necessarily maybe too expensive, but they're certainly a lot more expensive than there were. There's a lot more attention on them this year than there was, excuse me. um but we still look at I mean the difference between those like 1940 Superman cards, that I'm buying from PSA that you can get for like a couple $100 versus like the same era comic book going for like a couple $100,000, that's a humongous still difference in valuation, and you can decide if that makes sense or not. Clearly, the comic book and something like Action Comics #1 is where the value has lied and where all the attention and interest has been, and not so much on these items. But does that make sense? And will that always be the case? Like, those are the types of things as a value investor you should, I think, are interesting, but you have to understand the risks and rewards and all sorts of things with that.
I know we're going off on a massive tangent here, but what do you think that it is when you mentioned that the art of comic books? Because I'm an MTG nerd and I love art. When literally the moment that you mentioned the art in comic books will retain them, I was like, I'm in. Like, you literally said that. I was like, that was not something that ever occurred to me. But the moment you mentioned that the art of the comic book, because it's reflective of the period and it is unique to, like, the moment you said that, I was like, I'm in. And it wasn't something I'd ever thought of.
Yeah, and you get a specific page that was the first actual appearance rather than the whole comic book. One thing I always thought was a weakness of grading a comic book was you can't actually see maybe the coolest page or the coolest art. So there are all sorts of things, and grading in general is going crazy right now. Starting to grade movies and DVDs and Blu-rays and, all that sort of stuff. We're starting to grade. We're going to see a lot more being graded. Again, signs of a mania and a bubble, in certain things potentially. I've watched some videos this week that were alarming to me on people spending lots of money grading certain things, and they had no idea of, like, they didn't talk at all about supply and demand. They just were like, this has Michael Jordan, so it's got to be worth money. Like, this has Charizard, so it's got to be worth money. Like, it's that type of thinking. I think Mason was in the chat here earlier. He might still be here, but like, one story Mason would tell me is like, people would come into a store and just be like, I'll buy all the Charizards, right? It's the same. It's like, no, like, you don't really understand. Like, you get one piece of it. It's like, well, Michael Jordan's popular, but like, why that specific Michael Jordan memorabilia? How much of that card or movie or thing is there in the world? How much hasn't been graded? If the price ever goes up, what will, it'll provide more incentive to grade, et cetera, et cetera. It's like really learning how these markets work. And I see a lot of like really big confidence and maybe a little bit of a lack of sort of analysis. But yeah.
I know I've long overextended to this. Do you want to move to questions or should I?
Dude, I love talking with you and talking about this stuff. We go for a long time, but we could do some questions. Let's see.
Also, I do appreciate too when I am wrong about something, and I'm going to include Zakil on this too. But when I talk with you and Zakil, I never get told to like shut up or sit down. It's like I get to finish what I'm saying, and then you guys will give me an argument afterwards telling me, okay, like, I get where you're coming from, but look, here's another argument. And it's like, you were like 15 seconds in, I was like, all right, I was wrong. Like I love that. That's part of why I love having these discussions with you guys. It's like, y'all are great minds. I love it.
I think that it's great, right? So much of this is theories. And so it's great being around a lot of these theories, and then you can kind of pick and choose which ones make the most sense, because like, that could end up being wrong, the theories that I presented, even though they're good theories, probably to at least like consider and factor into like your decision making.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what life is your belief systems are not necessarily 100% accurate. They're sort of like the best you can do at the moment, and you're constantly trying to sort of test them and improve them, and so I think that's like a successful attitude to debate and conversation. Unfortunately, too often today, it feels like people come in with like an opinion and want to prove and like want to be right and convince you, rather than like,
the entire idea of people trying to convince each other is so small.
Yeah. And I do think it's the minority. I think most people are I think most things that a lot of us don't like are just like loud minorities.
But I mean, yeah. To go back to the earlier point, though,
Yeah.
I think I truly think Magic has the greatest potential to grow from where they're at. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that they were doing like the secret layers and the IP brandings. I feel like that's shooting fish in a barrel. That is so small gambling that you can't fail. That
Yeah.
like, what are you doing? Like I love that they're doing it to test it to see if it works, but I don't know. Yeah. I just feel like they're thinking
Yeah.
so
I mean,
small.
so
I
I think one thing to really like, so I think one thing to really like about Pokemon and Magic is that they have not gone to like one of one, one of 10, one of 50, one of
Mhm.
100s yet. And that is in their back pocket. Both of these companies. So there's their moves, their collectability moves that these IPs or companies have not yet gone to, and yet they're still very successful for a variety of reasons. You know, more so playability on one side, the other side just having like the strongest IP. you know,
Can I address a question in the chat
yeah, yeah.
just to pull us
Take 'em
forward?
out.
So HTWA, I can't pronounce that correctly, but I love the question that he just brought up. Said that momentum investing is the only profitable way of investing currently. He said I said that, and I did. But doesn't that assume that the market is being rational about everything? That is very unlikely, in my opinion. So I'm going to agree with the first part and then disagree with the second. And I'm going to say that I am not assuming that the market is being rational. In fact, I'm doing the exact opposite. And that's what's bringing me to my belief. So when you say it's very unlikely, you're absolutely right. The market is not going to act rationally. The reason why I say it's momentum investing is that the market acts rationally inside a bubble. And this is something that is very hard for me to explain to people is that when a market is acting irrationally, they still act rationally inside that irrationality. And what I mean by that is that when you see a market is they're way overhyping an item, or they're way overvaluing, or they're way over showing way too much attention or love, whatever it is, you see that an entire marketplace has misappropriated their attention. Now you can say this is uncommon. It's actually quite common. And when they do this, they act in a very logical manner. So they've made one illogical step, but they're still going to act logically inside that bubble that they've created for themselves. And there's plenty of opportunity inside to, okay, we're racing to the top, we're racing to the top, we're racing to the top. Okay, hold on, we've reached the top, we're still inside this, we haven't even reached the edge of the bubble yet, but people are starting to realize, oh, maybe this isn't right. Okay, we're stepping down. And if you're just monitoring the sales data, you can follow this all the way up. And then the moment it starts tipping, sell your entire position. And the more people that do this forces it more towards the edge of the bubble. So irrationality is something that has rationality to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Value investing depends on two assumptions. The first assumption is that markets are irrational, and you can be more rational than the market and figure out what's wrong. The second assumption is that in the future it's going to move towards rationality. And so you're going to make money because you're going to have things, more correct than the market. And over time, the market's wrong right now, but they're going to move towards you, right?
Mhm.
Now, momentum investing actually doesn't care about, is the market rational, is it irrational? Who cares? It's only about the trend. It's not about where it should be. It's just about where it is
What
and where it's going.
is?
Yeah, where it is and where it's going to go next in the very short term. And that's
Where I
why you
live.
you don't really need to know anything about the supply and demand of an item, although a little bit can certainly be helpful because it can tank things.
Oh, I think it really helps, but yes.
So that's being a value investor a little bit, which you should be. I mean, everyone does actually evaluate things, even momentum investors. But if you were to just purely look at buying and selling, for example, you wouldn't know that like a reprint was happening, or like you wouldn't like there'd be factors or things that you're actually not taking into
Um,
value investment type things that you'd be doing. So, but to HTWA, it's really just about correctly guessing those trends, being at the early side, and then following it up, selling at the high, kind of rinse and repeat.
But yeah, I I find this is something that's hard for people to understand. It is very possible for a person and even a group of people to make one irrational decision, and past that irrational decision, every decision they make thereon is still rational. I, I've discovered that is a very hard concept to explain and to try and talk about, but I feel like that's how and I say bubbles very hesitantly because I don't want to say that, but that's how marketplaces exist. It's that a group of people will decide, no, this isn't the case, and that might be against all logic reason, but every decision they make from there will still follow basic logic. And if you can understand that, you can get in the minds of so many different TCGs, so many CCGs of like, okay, look, they were wrong at point A, but everything they do from B, C, D, and E is the same that that group did, that group did, that group did, that group did. And they're all going to point back to say, no, 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 we made a different initial decision. It's like, it doesn't matter economically. It doesn't matter. And that's what I'm trying to point out. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if that made that clearer or more ambiguous, but I'm trying.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking about the unlisted leaf break and opinions on that. Are you familiar with that at all, Chris?
Yeah.
Basically, Unlisted Leaf partnered with StockX. Do you know who Unlisted Leaf is? Have you heard of him? He's a very large, he's the largest by sub count, I believe, Pokemon pack opening sort of channel.
Okay.
One of the biggest and most popular ones. He's been doing it for a long time. And he partnered with StockX to basically do an opening. I don't think he's ever done an opening before where he actually sold packs to people. He's always just been someone who kind of opens them on his channel for the views. I don't think it's been made clear like how much money he received for doing that, for partnering, whatever. The anger towards Unlisted Leaf came because of the prices that he was charging. He was charging $50, I believe, for 3 celebrations packs. And there was and I think a lot of people who bought thought that he'd actually be opening them. He didn't actually open them. Some other people opened him, and he was on the stream, so people were upset about that. And then the people who opened them, particularly in the beginning, I think were like pretty rough with the cards and like went through them really fast and didn't even like show them on camera. So basically people bought these packs, I think, because they really like Unlisted Leaf, because they wanted him to say their name and talk about them on stream, right? Like all the reasons that people like overpay in the sense of like they pay a lot more than they'd have to pay on eBay. They're paying to sort of support the content creator and have them have that like personal interaction. And they also didn't get that. So I think both people who bought into it were upset with him for those reasons. And then also people who were just upset that he was charging so much for himself, basically, like so much over. But who knows, like, was it StockX? And
I mean, the fault lies on him for the lack of communication at the end of the day.
Yeah, and nobody knows, like, did he get a percentage of like the amount that they were charging?
Look, if he got a percentage of $50 per card, I mean, how many did he sell? I mean,
and that would be probably worse, because then he was really aware of it and also wanted it to be higher. Another alternative would have been him, just partnering with StockX and kind of like trusting them to do it. Again, that's obviously a mistake. You should know what they're going to charge and how they're going to run it before you sign up for anything.
That's not true. But yes, you're right that you should know. But at the same time, communication is the issue here, and communication should come on the end of the established platform, and that's StockX. Now, at the same time, he is responsible for signing on with StockX from that point. But at $50, my question is, I mean, even if he had a percentage, how much did he make off of that? Like, how many sold? Because I'm wagering he probably made what, like $500 off that, versus the amount of heat he's taking on social media.
Oh, I highly doubt that he only made $500. I would get venture because they probably made like 100 some thousand or whatever. They
These
like,
companies don't
yeah,
partner with people without having an extreme majority share because they understand their platform.
yeah.
My
I
point
wouldn't
is
be
not to say that
surprised
he
if it
didn't
was
make
10 or
money,
20,000, but
but
I don't
but
really.
but versus what the platform itself made, and people are going to roast him because his name on it. And I would say that the reason they're roasting him is because the platform itself failed him.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
I'm
mean,
a bad guy.
listen.
That's my
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that you're giving him too much of a pass in terms of like, I mean, if I were to partner with someone and then they were to take advantage and not do a good job, and I put my name on it, and so a lot of people like trusted it and did it only because I put my name on it, I would owe those people an apology. Like, I think pretty straightforwardly, and I would take accountability for that. Now, that being said, what happened was like he got all sorts of death threats, I guess, and like people were so angry at him and like unsub from his channel and all this sort of stuff. That's silly. Like it's and also even like unsubbing, like I guess the unsubbing is sort of like the YouTube way of like telling someone like we don't support you anymore, like we're gonna pull our support, and it's the way we can have the most impact. So I get that, particularly if it's like for a short term thing to send the person a message, maybe. Um, I think it's good that people were upset. I think that it's all about, for me, it's always about the balance of upset, and certainly like 10 to 20% of people in this current climate and this current Pokemon world are just like so over the top in like the negativity and the anger and the resentment and the way they treat people. Like, like for me, you want unlisted leaf to be successful. And if you don't think this is good for him or the hobby, there are ways of letting him know that, or showing that isn't, you know, death threaty. And I understand it from a smaller, perspective. Like I've gotten one death threat, but I've also gotten I know, but I've also gotten a number of just like, we hope like everyone in your life leaves you, and that you're alone, and you're like these types of comments. Yeah. And then a lot of like, you're a prick, like you're a jerk, you're an asshole,
This is
like,
why I enjoy having such a minimal social media
yeah.
presence.
I think what happens is that when people get successful and you don't like them, your hate increases
Oh
because there's
no.
that cognitive dissonance, right? Because it's like, I hate this guy, but other people like him. Now my hate intensifies because it's like, it's that weird sort of like, well, I can't like that's weird. I can't be wrong. So instead of like reflecting and being like, huh, like maybe there's something to this, generally people like their hate intensifies. It's an unfortunate human thing.
You can't speak to your enemy. And when you can't speak to your enemy, you speak
Yeah.
to yourself, and yourself has already reached a prejudged verdict for the person. So you're talking to your own verdict. And what happens when you self that I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not a
I
psychologist. I
my
make shit up.
message to Enlisted Leaf would be like, we love you, like we appreciate you as a Pokemon card community. Your channel has been, a great constant thing when this hobby wasn't even that big, and we're more than willing to sort of like forgive this with a little bit of like just acknowledgement and like trying to like, fix it and make it up to these people. And I would be like more than happy to like forgive him like immediately, and I'm not particularly upset or irritated. I think people who bought in and might have had a bad experience or felt bamboozled, you
And
know it's unfortunate,
I don't know. I live by the fact that I don't know. I live by the fact that this was a mistake that happened. Is this something that this channel does repetitively? And if not,
not at all.
okay,
It's
a
the first
mistake
time.
happened. Okay, you made a fuck up. We're gonna continue on. Be apologetic, or not even apologetic, but just don't do it again. Like,
Yeah.
right, you made a mistake. And I get, because apologizing on a large scheme when you have a ton of followers can actually be really detrimental, even though it's probably the right thing to do. Just don't do it again. And that's the proof. Either apologize and do that, take that kind of hit, or or just don't
So
do it again.
one thing I think is really powerful in life is actually apologizing. and not apologizing just to get people to like you. And I actually think that there's a big difference. And a lot of like apology videos to me ring completely false on the internet and feel very much like they're the person is like, just trying to like get out of the heat, or they're
It's
trying to like
recorded and it's online and it's posted on YouTube. It means nothing as an apology.
but I think that there are other people who like apologize and it's taken very differently because they're actually sorry. Like they feel bad. And I think that I
The
personally,
apology
this
is
is my
not for
opinion.
the thing at that point, it's to their followers, which is way different. Because if you have to record an apology and post it online for forgiveness, you're not posting it for the thing you did, you're posting it to the people who are mad at you, which in my mind diminishes 90% of the reason why you're apologizing in the first place for whatever you did, because you're not apologizing for what you did, you're apologizing to the mob that's upset with you. So
Yeah, I mean, apologizing to the mob, when we use that
I say
term,
mob very, very meanly, by the way. I just mean
yeah.
whoever's upset with you ambiguously
And
on
I
the
think that
internet,
there is a
right or wrong.
mob of sorts in Pokemon right now that we should not back down to. There's a mob of people who are making up lies about people, who are exaggerating things, who are claiming things that aren't true, who are believing that people's like motives are way worse than they actually are. Like there's a lot of that toxicity right now that is not what you should be apologizing to. But there's also a middle ground of like, I apologize that I like made some mistakes here and owning up to it, but I'm not like apologizing for like my life, these types of things. You just sent me a message. What's going on?
Sorry, man. I really have to run to the bathroom real quick.
Oh yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. I gotta go.
I decided to close. Yeah, go for it.
I'll be right back. Sorry, man.
No, not at all. Yeah. So I mean that's my take on all of that. But I don't really know like what happened. So it's sort of like we're all making takes without really knowing the details, as we mostly do. So let's see what else people are saying. Let's see, people saying that people don't love any. Yeah, when I say love, I don't mean like you love your family or your friends. It's a enjoy is probably a better word, but just like we want you to succeed, and we appreciate what you do for a hobby that we all really love and enjoy. And I feel that way about every like Leonhardt, like Super Duper Danny, Real Breaking Nate, Boo, Frosted Caribou, all these big content creators. I really value what the work that they do, and that they care about the hobby and trying to grow the hobby, and PokeRev, all these people. That doesn't mean I'm gonna agree, with everything that what they do, or have the exact same perspective or morals.
Oh, I miss collect inspect usual recording, because I could just turn my camera black and you'd never know I was gone through the beauty of editing. I apologize.
Totally unprofessional. My gosh, you're supposed to have like catheter for one of these things. Don't you know that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other question, right, is like, should he post an apology video, or is his apology already enough? I don't really care about that, so much myself. I think that like it's also the type of thing too, and then maybe we'll leave this topic and go to other things. But like if you apologize, you have to like keep apologizing over and over again, because the problem with YouTube and social media is like not everyone's going to see it. And so like I just feel like then you're just like apologizing constantly all the time. So there comes a point where like you have to sort of like move on. I do think that and if other people are not willing to move on, it becomes a situation of like, now they're sort of that mob of like, they just want, like, they're not really there to forgive you or to see you succeed, which is what we all should want for every person, out there. Like if you don't want someone, if you're so angry at someone that you don't want them to succeed, you need to look in the mirror. Like I firmly believe that as a human being. So
I think of it more selfishly as the content producer, in that you have two choices, and either way the outcome is the same. Either you apologize and you recognize there are people who are not going to forgive you for what happened, and you're always going to have detractors who point at the fact that, hey, you made a mistake, or you ignore it and you never do it again, and that is your acknowledgement of like, hey, I made this, I just didn't want to lose, like, whatever percentage of my followers, but I personally recognize this as a mistake. I'm not going to publicly acknowledge it because it will really hurt my business and my income, which could really hurt me. In which case you still have these people who will then come back and say, hey, you never apologized for this. So at this point, the mistake is already made. No matter what you do, you're going to have detractors. So choose how you want to play it and play it accordingly. Because that's what it is. When you're on an entertainment scheme where you're talking to hundreds and thousands of people, it becomes entertainment. And that's what it is. And if you expect apologies from entertainers who have to apologize to thousands of people, apologies are meant for one-on-one. You're not getting that. You're going to get entertainment. Expect nothing less.
And I think like the advice that I give to myself and or like when I make a mistake like that is you just take it as a learning experience, and that it's human and normal to make mistakes, and you should not beat yourself up that much about it. And it's just about learning from it and moving on. Now, there may have been some really significant lapses in judgment and some things that happened there that deserve some introspection and some time to think about like what happened here, but
yeah, I mean, and if he made $20,000 off it, beating him up a little bit, not the worst thing to do, because it does start to seem a little dishonest at that point, and I will admit that. But overall, stand by my larger point.
ABA Made Easy says, hey, Jake, I'm starting an initiative to donate Pokemon cards to the children at the hospital I work at to make their day better. Any suggestions on how I can increase transparency with this effort? Well, I'm sure that's something a lot of people would be interested in. So, definitely reach out. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to like other people. I'd maybe E4, start like an E4 thread, because there are a lot of like collectors and people who are passionate about community stuff. Get in touch with people like Gary, yeah, but that's great. That's great. You can certainly contact me on Instagram and, give me some details, and if I can, help, all that sort of stuff. I'm always, interested in hearing what people are trying to do. It's good for others, that sort of thing. Yeah, Mason giving some good advice too, reaching out to local game stores and other sorts of things. Yeah, it could be something too that it's making a local effort could make a lot of sense, and also be something that you could continually do and could be a win-win.
One of the biggest things that I pulled on, and I got very, very, very lucky, mind you, was just that making YouTube content was something that I knew I would be terrible at, and I knew I would be awful at. And Jake, I'll be honest with you, I tuned into you do the sessions on Sunday. I call them sessions because I think I tuned in over half a dozen times and I heard you giving the exact same advice. And I was amazed at your patience. It was something that I could never muster, to be honest with you. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this man is giving great advice constantly and very fundamental good advice every week.
Yeah, I got a little bit burned out from doing those lives for a while because I was getting the same questions every time. So it does burn you out when you answer similar things. It's part of why I ended up bringing on lots of guests to talk about different topics. And some conversations I love having kind of over and over again, because I do think that either I guess I'm just really interested in them, or they do evolve, as time goes on. But yeah, but that's definitely a part of doing it. And it's a YouTube thing. It's because people it's also on the same stream, right? Because people will jump in later, of course, because we're doing 3-hour long streams, and they'll ask a great question. It just happened to have already been asked two other times, and I want to encourage people to ask those, but
It's also, I think it's a who you're talking to and what they're doing kind of thing. And this isn't to diminish who you, excuse me, who you speak to, but like I spoke to somebody about MTG about 2 weeks ago, and I was like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? Like you get shit and you're on it and like I want to talk to that person again. And then but there are other topics where it's like, okay, this is a fundamental, yeah, we need to know this. And there is kind of like this, I don't know, there's this basic element of things like this cycle that you can fall into. And it really does I think you know this better than I do, because again, I'm not anywhere near built for it, but it's like there is a patience for it. And I would call it a patience because I think people do truly come in earnest, but it's a constant thing that gets kind of repetitive with constantly being out there and constantly fronting the like the first questions to the hobby that oh man, it's just at a certain point I would literally throw up my hands and be like, learn or please don't. And I have.
I think
Um,
that's the battle with any sort of creativity, is that anything can feel repetitive. And so you constantly have to try to create new things. And that can be different topics, talking about current events, bringing on new guests, doing different types of content. The Patreon stuff where we're like where it's more of a discussion and there are a bunch of people where we're doing deep dives into specific analytic, right? Like you constantly having to like reinvent or not even reinvent's too strong, but just add to it so that it one, I think, doesn't become a chore for you, that you're doing it because that you're really
mhm.
enjoying it. And then two, so that it is useful for people who have been there for a year,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I found value. I just think it's really nice when you find, like talking with you, talking with Zakil, like it's those are those are the exciting conversations that it comes down to. You find people who are willing to have conversations on the same level. I think you find them if you want to. Um, that's the enjoyment that I find at this point. Just whether it's on YouTube or not. I think again, we spent like 45 minutes discussing philosophy, and I would have gladly spent another hour discussing that, minimum an hour.
yeah, I mean, I have thought like one day maybe starting like a politics like philosophy
Oh,
channel. I
I would
because
have to come on under a
I
pseudonym.
love talking about that stuff, but it's just like so not, I don't want it in this space. Like I like the philosophy and the lifestyle. I don't know. I bring it in a little bit, but yeah, because I don't know. It's this weird thing of like I never really thought I'd be doing like social media. This is just conversations I always liked having in private, and then sort of evolved. But um, let's see. Let's see if there are any other questions here. I'm sure there are. And if you guys have any questions, go for it.
HWA, just DM me on Discord, man. You've got good questions, but they're questions that I think will be better suited towards actually addressing and writing. Happy to do it. Wolf of Tin Street, just at me. Happy to literally anybody who wants to learn. I'm very happy.
Yes, Chris is accessible and definitely generous with his time. Um, what else? Did you find any questions from the beginning? Because I know that we like normally do that.
No, we have a couple, but they all kind of address the keel, so I don't feel comfortable kind of bringing them up because he's not here. So
Hmm.
I know it's a bit awkward, but it is what it is, and I don't want to bring them up without him being here because they all are asking kind of for his opinion on things.
We get it. We Zakil's popular. We
Dude,
get it.
he's got such silky smooth radio voice quality. Like
Yeah.
this cast clearly is diminished just from that alone. I had my brother listen to one of our podcasts and he was like, "Oh, well, I don't have a co-host like that who sounds like pure radio quality." And I'm not making that up actually. So if Zakil actually listens to this to the end, he can boost his ego a little bit.
Um.
Oh, I could talk about NFTs if you want. I mean, I've been taking a deep dive into them, but that's deep for this point in the cast.
Do you see a question on that?
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah,
Uh,
whatever. We can talk about
how
whatever.
how do you feel about premium branded NFTs coming to market with big brands like Marvel, DC, Disney, etc? I don't trust that they know how to handle the market. I think NFTs are probably, I'm extremely bullish on NFTs. I think for the Gen X, I don't think millennials. I think millennials are too late. I think for Gen X and later, um, I think the digital age is the new era of collectibles. And I think that they are in a unique position to collect them ahead of rest of market because I think that is the trend. Really do. I think a lot of pre-existing and if not all current models are extremely inefficient and are poor and will all fail. And I'm hoping that they do because I think when they do, it will only support the fact that that is I think NFTs are kind of the future of collectibles. I say this as Jake goes away because I know he'll slap me for having this belief, but I truly do believe that there's a new era of collectability. There's a new era of understanding of the internet, what it means to collect, what it is that you're collecting, and I think there's going to be a new. I don't want to call it a new, but there's a different way of having this collectible experience, which is separate from the physical objects. And I think in our lifetime, predominantly collectibles will be fun. Physical collectibles will be fine, but I think NFTs are really establishing a new way of having that experience of having something that you interact with because so many young kids these days are they're interacting with things purely through a digital landscape. So when you collect something, it's going to be purely through a digital landscape. And when you do that, now what's next is, and I'm always pulling on this, is how is it attached to a game? How is it attached to something that will pull you back? So if it's a picture of an ape, no, that's a fad that's going to fail. I know. Again, I don't care. Be mad at me. It's terrible. You can make money off of it now. I won't disagree with that, but that's child's play compared to what this can actually do. And when I see something like Zed Run, and I love Zed Run right now, it's great. When I see something like Chicken Derby, where you're buying NFTs that can do things, NFTs that can breed other NFTs, you're starting to create a game, and you're starting to create a game wherein there's going to be lapses of people overbreed to make money. Okay, well, I can't make money anymore. Okay, what happens now? Either the game fails itself, and if it does, okay, another game will come, or the game will suffer for a bit and then it'll come back and you'll establish an actual town. Boomtown is done largely for NFTs as we know them now. That's not true. There's a Boomtown is done for established NFTs as we know, and those established NFTs will now either die or create fundamental, um, just fundamentals for the entire industry, or the entire industry will die because there are still Boomtown NFTs, but there needs to be a standard that comes to exist, and there is clearly interest in it to exist. So it's just going to be fascinating to see how that comes to be, and how that comes to grips. Now, and again, I latch on to things that have games and have applicability, and I truly believe that is how it will come to fruition. But I could totally be wrong. But in the meantime, I like that like Zed Run is run by an organization. That's not, random people. That's not random artists. That's people who want to make money, whether they hold on to that to sell it for a profit, or whether they continue to hold on to it, they can continue to make more money. It doesn't matter. Either way, they have a vested interest in it continuing. And that vested interest in the NFT community continuing is what I'm interested in. Because you've had the fireworks, but what do we do now? And there needs to be a secondary market that circulates around this, that keeps people interested outside of the game itself. The game itself has to be interesting, but there needs to be a secondary market that keeps passive interest. And NFTs that do that, I'm totally in for. NFTs that don't, and I think this is like 98% of them, it's all for the tech industry. I think the tech industry is vastly overpaid, personal opinion, and then they want to spend their money there because that's what they understand. Go for it, but I don't think it's going to be very successful in the long run. Jake, you're back. What do you think?
Just on
I've ranted for
NFTs
some
in general?
time.
Was there a specific NFT question, or just NFTs in general?
Well, I quite like NFTs around like circulating around Z.Run, where it's based around a horse running game where the horses each have their unique statistics around Chicken Derby. Chicken Derby just copied Z.Run completely. It's chickens who can run. And when you repopulate these NFTs, they have a random variable based off of their parents with a little differentiation. And but there's a game attached to the NFT itself. So you have a game and you have an object and it's collectible and it's always changing. That line of thinking, I really buy into. The NFTs where it's like buy an image of an ape or of this because there's only 8,888 of them. I see that as truly, and I love capitalism, to be honest with you. I see that as hyper capitalism absolutely abused to its highest height. And I think that is absolute awfulness. So I won't buy into that, but I still see value in the NFTs themselves. And I think, you know, I think there's future value in them.
When I think about investing, it always comes down to like principles of like moats. So what competitive advantage or what aspects of whatever you're investing in is going to stand the test of time? And so I would really go into it thinking that. So what is it about this specific NFT project that's going to stand out, against others, that's going to be consistent over time, that's going to stand the test of time, that can't be duplicated, replicated, made better, right? And so for me, it's just too early. Like I don't see how any of these things, and this is also can be a lack of knowledge thing, but I don't see how any of the things that are there yet might necessarily have a huge advantage. Now, some of the earliest projects probably will, because they're always going to be the earliest projects. So for example, what are they called? Oh my God. I'm like, so I haven't thought.
You're totally fine.
Cryptid punks. What are they called?
Yeah.
Cryptid. Oh my God. I'm like metazooing. Yeah. Not cryptid. Oh my God. Oh,
don't worry. Just don't call it metabase. They'll see, the rest of this audience will see that in about 4 weeks when I mess that up. But yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of that. Whatever. But I'm sure someone on the chat will say it once we get.
No, but I agree with your
like that type of stuff, like Beeple's, first big projects, like these types of sort of like historic monumental type things, like they may be historic in the sense of like if NFTs really take off and the space really takes off and people are very interested and internet people are very interested in it and there's like collectability and that sort of history. But I don't really know. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I have no idea how to price something like that. Again, in the short term, it's momentum investing, it's hype investing. I made, a few $1,000s off a Top Shot, momentum investing, right? I just saw an opportunity. I do it sometimes. I just saw an opportunity to momentum invest. When I looked at those highlights or whatever, I thought this is so overpriced, and so because
Sorry. I see NFTs as value investing in the way that you look at old card collectibles, because my value investment is that the kids of tomorrow and the kids of today are going to understand the internet in a way that we don't today, but in a way that they need to. And
but the way to invest in that would be to invest in one of the companies, not in a specific NFT project.
Sure. But if we're doing that, why are we investing in
NFTs? If you think NFTs are going to succeed, but you don't know which one, it's the same thing if you think Bitcoin's going to succeed, but you don't know which one, right? So it's these. Then you want to take a step further back and say, well, I want to invest in a company or something that I think is going to make a lot of them or be involved in a lot of them. But even that's a risk, because that company could be at risk for a newer company. I mean, it's yeah.
I'm struggling with the fact that if you're going to switch from collectibles to investing in the stock market, I'm going to surrender to you every day on every front that you bring that forward to. I'm suggesting that from a collectible front, if you are taking a position on what you think the future is going to be, and if you're investing in collectibles instead of investing in the stock market, get the hell out of here and go invest in the stock market. Like seriously, don't invest in this over the stock market.
But what I'm comparing it to is not that. I'm comparing it to which Marvel project should I invest in? Okay, so if I believe in NFTs and there are 10 Marvel NFT projects, which one is the one that I should invest in? And why can't there be a one that's going to be made next year that's even better than all those, that is the most collectible and most investable? It's
How
that
does
sort
that
of,
logic not exist with cards?
it's because Pokemon, there isn't going to be like another knockoff Pokemon card company that's going to compete with Pokemon, at least in the short term.
But there's only one validated Pokemon company, and there's only going to be one validated Marvel company.
But Marvel company might give that license to a number of different NFT projects. We don't
But
know.
there will still always be an origin,
There
right? There's
could
still always going to be an origin.
if there's a lot of demand and interest in that. And so that's where you get into like if one NFT Marvel project lasts for like 3 to 4 years and it's really successful and people really like it, then I agree with you. Then it's a lot more likely that that specific Marvel NFT project becomes long lasting. But if
I
there are
don't.
five right away and none of them take off that much,
They'll
you know,
never do that. It doesn't make sense for them to do. NFTs are hyper
we'll see.
capitalism at its height in that I'm going to produce 15 and that's all I'm going to produce. And I'm going to drastically, and I do mean drastically, overprice all 15 because I know there's 400 people who want this 15 item. And I know that if I charge $10,000 for it, somebody will pay it. And then they'll sell it on the secondary market as somebody who missed out on the moment for 20,000 because you know what? They were too busy at the time, but they've got the money to spend it. That is what NFTs circle around. That is the entire methodology and logic and just cycle that they currently circle about. And I don't think that that is, I don't know. I don't think that that is crazy. I think that that is the future.
Marvel would make more money if they give the license to a lot of people. So why? So why did
No, no, they
why did
won't make more
sports
money.
cards? Why did sports cards and comic books crash in a lot of ways? It's because they gave the license out to too many people and they printed too much and they tried to make money. It was greed,
Mhm.
and they overshot the demand. They didn't think they were going to overshoot the demand probably at
There's
the
no
time.
longer a need to hand out the license. There's no longer a need. You control all of it. You control all of the editions you put out. You control all of the versions. So if you make a mistake, you correct it immediately.
But if the NBA partners with like 7 different types of top shots, let's say that NFTs take
Oh,
off
yeah.
and they part, or and Marvel gives the IP to like 8 different startups working with it, and etc. Like I don't. Again,
Then
I'm
they're
not.
gonna
I'm
lose.
not.
Then they fucked
I'm
it.
not sort of NFT. I'm not an NFT expert by any means, and you might be right that the incentives may not be there, and they might really do it. They might really protect the IP and only give it to one thing at a time, and really try to build a community. I don't know. That's what, if you're interested in investing in that sort of stuff, that's what you want to be thinking about is how do I see this project? Are there going to be other projects that are going to come after this that are going to compete or be better than this? And if so, that's a risk.
Yeah.
So that's just what I would say. Now, as far as NFTs more broadly speaking, honestly, I don't really know.
I have dove deep this past month and a half into NFTs, and it's been fascinating. It's been profitable, but it's been fascinating. I mean, it's just you. It's if you think that TCGs are momentum or hype driven, you have no idea. And the fact that there is this level of desire and engagement, it's crazy. And I don't think it's sustainable. But what I do think is sustainable is just the concept of this idea of having digital assets. I don't think that this idea of having 8,000 of a unique item and people spending tens of thousands. I think that is so the beginning of this of what it is to have an NFT. And I think it's no, I think it's dumb money. It's not a channel. I think that's just what it is. And it's not even dumb money in that you can't make money in it right now. You sure can, but the money that you're putting into it, if you're putting it in, it's dumb money to you. You don't give a shit what happens to it. And so you're having fun with it. But the fact that this idea is there and it's circulating, and I think as long as the internet exists and continues to become more and more of a regular factor in people's lives, because when I was born, the internet was like, what is that? And when people are around now, I think it's much more of a massive impact. So I'm bullish on it for that reason. It's entirely personal, but I think the core concept is there, and the fact that so many people who are not comfortable, honestly, with the internet are against it makes me happier for it. That makes me more confident in it because if people just accepted that, oh, this is the future, great. No, I think the internet is the future, and I think this is part of the internet, and that's what makes me bullish on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely bullish on online digital collectibles. That is a guarantee that it just makes perfect sense for a lot of
Mhm.
reasons. Now, the difficulties are going to be ownership, like actually experiencing and feeling ownership, which
Oh
is where
yeah,
the idea comes from, and then display and how do you share it and display it. And I think this NFT pairing with physical objects that you have, like, I think this type of thing is interesting and makes a lot of sense. So I think there's a lot of creative things that they're doing right now. Um, I also think the pairing with like physical events is interesting, like Gary Vee's whole thing, as a ticket or pairing it with sort of rewards or things that you get with the art. I think that's
Mhm.
very interesting because it creates both a collectability around having or owning the item, owning the code, whatever, however whatever the correct lingo is gonna be. But I also think that the yeah, but actually getting some sort of real life benefit for owning it, I think is very creative and kind of interesting. So, does the NFT part of it, is the blockchain part of it add a lot to all of that? Is that necessary? I mean, versus like a cartoon orbit. If you remember, like that was so fun as a kid. There's clearly a hunger and desire for online collectibles if it is done in a way, I'm repeating myself here, but it's so important that people actually feel ownership of it. That is crucial to collecting. It has to feel like you own it and it's safe and it's really yours and it can't just be like taken away, like these types of things.
Yeah.
I will say though that there's lots of examples of online collectibles, or even like collectible, we can say collectibles in games like skins, all these types of things. It's just on to the next one, right? Like they just make more, they make new ones. It's on to the
But that's
next one.
great. That's consumership. You move
No,
forward.
absolutely. But it can be this type of thing where it can really lose its value or interest rather than the older ones being the most value. Or like, so it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. Again, I would definitely, if you are interested in collectibles and these types of markets, I definitely studying the NFT market and understanding what's going on, I think is important. So,
Yeah.
and I'm a believer in it in some capacity.
I mean, again, I say this all the time. Where you can make money, I want to be there. I'm always there to be there because I want to make money, but that doesn't necessarily mean what you're investing in is a sustainable model. I believe that about Pokemon, and a large part I believe that about NFTs, and in a larger part I believe that about Magic. It doesn't matter. You're always in a bubble. You always have to establish a time frame of what you're investing in. And so long as you know what your time frame is when you invested in, and you know what you're doing when you're going in. You have that full game plan. If it fails, great. If it doesn't, get out as fast as possible and accept your loss and try again elsewhere. But I feel like NFTs really right now, you have the greatest chance for exponential growth. And I truly mean exponential growth. And you missed the high season, which was the last 6 months. It's dumb. It's dumb money. It's dumb money, and you're playing hot potato, and you need to know you're playing hot potato when you go in. And if you're okay with playing that game and you're okay with potentially holding the buck at the end, okay, let's play. But you got to be willing to do that in a way that you're not willing to do it, or you're not needed to in something like TCGs, something less liquid, um, which is fascinating to me. And I see things building up because of that impact that I don't see in NFTs, which I'd love to be a psychologist. I'd love to to investigate the difference in psyches.
You don't have to be a psychologist to have opinions on psychology.
It's fascinating. It's so crazy.
All right, Mason wants us to give our opinions on the Rudy's exclusive FAB sale and the results so far. And I'm surprised we haven't talked about this sooner. And a little FAB talk. Got to get it all in while we can before our co-host comes back.
I have nothing good to say about that. I mean,
let's hear your opinions, man. Or do you not want to?
no, I'll do it. I always, I mean, if I'm on, I'm gonna say my opinion. That's how I always stand. I I think it's so dumb. I think this is I think Rudy is taking this to Flesh and Blood, and he's taking this to MetaZoo and saying, pay me more. I think that is the entire reason for doing this. I think it is absolutely silly that people buy into this. I think it's absolutely frivolous, absolutely dumb. It shows his actual market power on the market, which actually is fairly substantial. So props to him. But what the fuck? Um, it's so obviously a power play for him to people paying him that it annoys me that people bought into it and it is succeeding because it is so obviously a power play for him to charge more money from the people paying him for this exact product. I I like Flesh and Blood. Like what?
Oh, you thought it was a good price at $1,000 each, and you bought two.
No,
That's what I'm hearing.
I didn't. No,
And you made some fake accounts and bought some more.
I could have, and I. This is a rare instance where there's an opportunity to make money, and I just say no. This is it offends me. It's not that it's wrong; it just offends me.
It offends you. Oh, that's a first in something like this.
It it is so blatant. It is just so. It's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer being, I'm gonna make money
I mean, Chris,
levels.
it's exactly what Logan Paul did with NFTs.
Yeah, well,
That's how I think of this. 100%. It's like
fair. That's fair.
I have a celebrity. Now we could say it's slightly different because it is like an actual promo card from FAB, so it's connected to that. It's not completely like just his celebrity. And I do think there's something to be said that like FAB collectors will want one of every promo maybe, and they'll feel the need to get this. I think a lot won't. Who knows? And I also don't even know if FAB is really going to have a long-term collector community, and it might just be playable. And who knows, right? We can speculate all day on that. But outside of that little bit, it just reminded me exactly of Logan Paul making 1.5 million just by dropping something, and then his fans buying it up because they like him and they want something with his face on, like this type of thing.
I knew.
And so,
yeah.
Yeah. So for me, like I bought one. So for me, I just so the only part of all of this that bothered me was Rudy's second video where he said, "I don't care about the money."
Sorry.
Like that.
That's bad.
That was the only. It's okay. That was the only thing that bothered me. Because it's like, dude,
you obviously do. Why?
What do you mean you don't care about the money? Like
no,
that.
You obviously do. You're just
like I don't know if he's
standard.
I don't know if he's like saying that to kind of like cause drama, because he's like his new thing is like, I'm going to cause a bunch of drama.
Absolutely doing it to stir drama.
We're just going to get clicks and I'm going to get watches, and like that's how the internet works, etc. And like how much he's etc. Like doing that just to make money, and how we all feel about that, and is that really good for people? Is that bad for people? Whatever. Is it mostly harmless? I'm in the mostly harmless category with stuff like that, but that part was just like ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But You know, and I'm just like, well, then just give all that money away to charity, dude. If you don't care about the money, $1.3 million, that would be an amazing experiment. Like if you donated that, first of all, the publicity you'd get and the response would be insane. And
Why he do it?
the psychological experiment of all that would be crazy. And think about how much good you could do for $1.3 million of charity. And you made that money for free. You spent $13,000 on those or whatever. Now we can say, right, he took the risk on promoting the game and getting in the game, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so he deserves to get paid out. All of that would be fine. But he said he didn't care. He said he didn't care about the money and didn't like want to make money or something. And that was like, all right. Like,
but he did take the risk on the game. So if he gets paid out on the game succeeding, I'm not going to.
So the only issue I had was that part. It was just the, I don't care about money. So an issue means like, I just like, all right, dude. Okay. Well, your actions and, you know, speak otherwise. But outside of that, yeah, I bought one because I wanted one for my collection as a sort of symbol of the crazy mania. And I made a lot of money and I just like, I was willing to just do that. And for me, I priced that card because I like the other things that come with it. There's those shards and I would have priced that card given its rarity. And I thought they would all sell out. So personally, and almost all of them did, but you know, I would have priced that at like $400 or $500 and I was willing to spend way above market because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I'd be able to get one for cheap.
2K right now, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you'd be lucky to sell one for 15, 1600. Like you'd be fortunate. I don't know how many people are buying them. Maybe people are still buying those. Maybe it has gone up to 2K. I don't really know. But I think that liquidity is going to be a serious issue on that, in my opinion. And if you really wanted to sell it, and particularly the longer you wait, and I do question like how much are people going to want it, but I could be wrong. That could be a $5,000, $10,000 card someday. I really don't know. What I can say is I bought it because I think it's hilarious, and I just decided to like do it and be a part of it. And you know, but again, I bought one for collectors purposes. So
it does a couple of things, which is uniquely interesting. So first of all,
yeah.
I disagreed with this. I think it's so frivolous, and I'm okay with accepting a lot of frivolous shit. I thought this was so frivolous, but within an hour of the video posting, I had 4 people messaging me saying, "Hey, are you gonna get this?" And it's like the people that it came from meant more to me than anything else, and it was just like the impact that he can have is clearly what's being flexed, and it's just
Yeah, I mean, but I already knew that because of how well MetaZoo did. Like,
and Flesh and Blood.
And Flesh and Blood, but Flesh and Blood I haven't followed. Like MetaZoo, I've been like really engaged in the whole time, and I saw exactly when Rudy did that video, the effect that had on MetaZoo. So,
but what happens when this particular content producer creates? I see 2 options, or I guess 3 options. 1, he continues doing exactly what he's doing, being an independent. 2, he joins a corporation and he chooses a favorite. Or 3, I forget what 3 is. I guess he closes down, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
but basically he's going to have to either choose a lane or you know, go off on his own eventually. And whenever he does that, everything he's been supporting up to then is going to get screwed if it's relying purely on him. So why?
Dude, bingo. This is exactly what I like to think about. So how much are certain card games dependent on him making videos about them, and also dependent on just his personality? But I worry more fully, I think the card world in general depends on Rudy. And some of these content creators, even MTG and Pokemon, like the investor collector, like his content and getting people excited to invest and feeling like they can make money, like all of that stuff has had such a effect on prices going up, in my opinion, and content like that. Now, it's not really just Rudy, it's all the discords and the forums, it's everything. But like how much of that stems from him, or I don't really know the answer to that, but I
Well,
definitely I think about people like retiring or people leaving. It's the same thing in companies. Like, I have a lot of like Berkshire Hathaway. I think about Warren Buffett retiring and like what's going, it's like these types of things when you have a cult of personality, or maybe that's too strong, but just a really strong personality that creates a lot of engagement because the person is so intriguing or engaging themselves. When that leaves, how much of it is about the cards versus the person? All this type of stuff. So it's an interesting topic.
but it's a lot about too, as to draw a lot of similarities, but he he has a large audience that gravitates to him for the content that he puts out, but that had to start somewhere. Basically, he has a very magnetic personality, and that started out somewhere. And you have a lot of followers around that, and then they all follow that personality. There's a danger to it, but there's also an added bonus too in terms of the audience that he can reach. Because if he's magnetic to people that matter, he can draw a lot of value for them by being magnetic to people in general. And I think I don't know if that, I don't know if I want to throw blame on that. Like, there's a danger to it, but everybody should
Yeah,
know that going in.
it's not a blame thing. I mean, the only blame that we could throw on, in my opinion, a content creator is like not acknowledging that or pretending that that isn't a reality, and like diminishing their sort of. I have a little bit of an issue with that, but but yeah, I mean, the reality is like,
But at what point, when you get to the size that he's at,
yeah,
how does he how would he, and I'm asking this actually as a question, and one for personal curiosity, but just what would him accepting responsibility for that look like? And don't get me wrong, I described Rudy in 2018 as like the Fox News of TCG industry, and I actually think he's gotten a lot better since then. But I'm curious, what do you think?
um, I don't know, So I think if this channel gets bigger, maybe I'll find out just to more and more over time, to some extent. But um, like I definitely, it's been an eye-opening experience having a channel, and I have more sympathy and empathy for bigger channels now than I did when I first started, because of just like the amount of work, the effort, the difficulty in doing it, the struggle in hearing all of the feedback, the you can't please everyone, like all these things, it just becomes very true. And so um I don't know, like, are you asking like what do I think? Like first of all, I'm not sure. Do I think he's done anything wrong with this FAB thing? Not really.
Or with any of the promo shit he's doing?
I I mean, the thing that concerns me, and I'm not sure it's fair to blame him, the thing that concerns me is he may not care about the money, but I can tell you that the majority of people buying all this stuff and the sealed product are not wealthy or not extremely wealthy. And these items I think are probably a lot more crucial that they actually go up, or or these types of things are released. And I Rudy is sort of like stay the course, always kind of positive like message. Although he talks about like you need to diversify and you should have money in like the S&P and bonds and real estate and all sorts of things. I
Really
think
good advice.
I think that message can probably get lost for some people because he gets people so excited and talks so much about the cards that we all love. That being said, like, yeah, I mean, I don't think I think it'd be unfair to go too negative on him for that. And I think that there is that sort of personal responsibility line that we constantly try to figure out on this channel and have the discussion. I don't really know if there's a direct answer. I think with this specific flesh and blood thing, again, the only part that rubbed me the wrong way was like, this isn't about money. And I was like, well, like a lot of people like put, a lot of money into this that they maybe didn't have, or that they're taking a big risk on it. And like, why don't you just refund them their money, and then they'll have like the money and the card, and it won't be and I guess like it's all for the experiment. I don't know like what he really thinks and what his rationalizations for saying those types of things, but that kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way, because I think a lot of people who are investing or collecting this stuff are not. Yeah, I'm repeating myself now.
I just think if you buy from him, or like literally if you're buying from him, you've accepted your responsibility. You've accepted his position.
Rudy, like I get that, and I think that that's true, but I also think that like you can be really careful as a content creator to warn people and try to offset mistakes and that sort of thing. And one could argue that.
You could tell them to invest in the S&P 500 all the time, and tell them to invest in that before you invest here. And when God damn it, I'm defending Rudy. The thing he tells people to invest in the right thing, and then then he tells them to invest in something. And the thing that I get worried about is that by doing that, he really does a disclaimer of saying, go invest in another thing if you're willing to hold something, and you're willing to hold it without an expectation of return. But if there is a return, it will be potentially huge.
I mean, that is not
buy my product.
That's not the feeling at all I get from this channel. I get the feeling that just buy anything that I put up and you will make money. Oh, and that's definitely what a lot of the patrons feel. And whether Rudy is responsible for that messaging or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
it's a little bit trickier, but he certainly doesn't dissuade it. I don't.
But why should he? That builds his brand.
Well, that's the question: is what type of brand do you want? What type of, right? Like, and yeah. So I mean, Rudy though, Rudy in MetaZoo, for example. Like Rudy was given these Kickstarter boxes, but also these he has like 100 sample promo cards. Like I think he has 2 sealed packs. Those alone are probably worth like $200,000 each of those little sealed packs. So it really does become a question of like, yeah, he made another 1.3 million, but like he's just being given like this insanely valuable for right now.
You don't think he earned that by building that brand? I'm dead serious.
No. That's not where I'm coming from. But where I'm coming from is just like he's so playing with house money. Like, a lot of us feel like we're playing with house money. The amount we made this year, like he just gets handed $400,000.
But he's earned his position.
I mean, earn is a tough word in life. I mean, he's built this channel, he's built this following, he's built a connection to lots of people.
I call that earning his position to be able to be in.
Sure, but like what? Like I mean, when we say earn, it's like there are different ways to earn things, right? There way like when we say earn, there can be this. He certainly has earned it in the sense that he has caused that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But earning in sort of like a moral sense of like he's morally done really good things for people, and so has earned that trust, or like these types of things. I think that's a bit more debatable and a bit more nuanced of a discussion. And it's one that I don't really know because I'm not a Rudy expert and I haven't watched every video and I don't know in person.
No, for sure. But we're departing from a capitalistic sense of things.
He's a fascinating character. He's a fascinating character. I'm a huge fan of his in the sense that I admire what he's done and I find him very interesting and very engaging, and that's kind of where I am with him. And who knows? I really don't know. I don't have an answer.
I want to disagree with the things that he does, but I also I'm like, if I was there, I'd do that same. I
Oh, you
do the same thing like every time. And it's just
yeah.
honestly, it's really fun to see that an individual can really have this kind of impact on the market, and that one person.
I would never
One,
do something like you did.
no, 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 no. And I'm not
Yeah.
here to say that everything he does is good, by
Yeah.
the way. I think a lot of this that he
And some
is a
people
lot of.
would call me an idiot, right? And would be angry at me for that and would say I'm foolish, get off your high horse, you idiot. Like he earned, and there's all that sort of weird anger,
But part of me just enjoys the fact that somebody can, at, almost at like an individual level, although I'm sure he's not an individual. In fact, I'm positive he's not an Alpha Investments is not an individual. That's like, I would wager at least five people. At least. But like that one person's name can have that kind of impact on TCGs, CCGs. I think that's so cool. I really do. And even though that like half the shit he says is probably wrong and misinformative, it's really cool that somebody can do that. It's hard for me. I don't know. It, it's it's a weird imbalance of
I
like
mean,
you've
the
achieved a
thing,
great deal of things, but then you abuse what I would consider abusing your station so consistently, but in abusing it, you gain more viewers and you earn more content, and then it's like, oh well, you're it's like,
I think the reason, so I think part of it is like Rudy kind of like part of his brand is like the everyman, right? And it's, he came from humble beginnings, right? He worked
yeah.
like, as a waiter, and then I think it's like a car mechanic or car mechanic before a waiter. I'm not sure, but he worked these types of jobs that we all can relate to, or most of us can relate to.
Then he worked with stocks.
Then he did that, yeah, and so he's also financially knowledgeable, right? It's like the perfect backstory, right? Um, uh, and so I think that people watch that and they feel a connection to him and they feel like I can be successful too, or I can do that too. And I think there's definitely some truth in that, but there's also like the reason Rudy is so successful is because he has a gigantic empire where he makes a lot of money in a number of different ways. So he makes money from YouTube ad revenue. That's definitely the smallest. That's not going to be that considerable amount of money.
Patreon.
Patreon is very solid. Just in terms of the $15 a month, $20 a month, $25 a month. He has thousands of patrons. So that's going to
He
be,
made the decision to make it exclusive at the point that Watsy should have.
and so okay, so the other thing he gets through Patreon is he's able to move so much product that he gets product at such cheap prices and have such great relationship with distributors and can move like product that isn't necessarily the most desirable sometimes through those methods. That allows him and has over time allowed him to develop great relationships and get the premium products for good prices. Okay. He's also been able to develop relationships with PayPal, eBay, all sorts of things where he pays. I know they've changed a little bit recently, but and this is all through his hard work and ingenuity and creativity. But people have to understand this. So he's paying less for the boxes. He has this huge fan base that he can be liquid with and sell to. He has he has tons of capital that's always coming in from that. He's getting tons of revenue on top of that. So he's able to buy everything and keep a ton of it sealed. And a lot of it, even if it doesn't go up at all, it's absolutely fine. It doesn't really actually matter. He has so much product. He has so much going on. He has so much money. He also has real estate properties and all sorts of other things that he has going on for him. That is not Joe Schmo buying 5 booster boxes and then putting it in the closet. Like, and I think that there's a little bit of like, I don't think Rudy's made a video where he's like, I'm not you. And like, in order to become me, these are the actual things that you would have to do. Like here's the actual behind the scenes. And maybe he has, and I think Mason's here and has watched a ton of his content.
No, I don't think he has.
Whereas actually I think Darium does a little bit more of that to Darium's credit, and did a little bit more of that behind the scenes stuff. But it's sort of like, to me, often the real winners are the people who are getting the distributor low pricing. So even if these items do go up over time and they are good investments, the biggest winners are the ones who are holding
Make
a
an
lot of
immediate
it
profit,
and
regardless.
getting it really low and are able to flip part of it and then reinvest it into other things and hold some of everything. And so I just think that I'm not sure that how explicit Rudy has made that to his audience. I would imagine most people get it and understand that, but I do feel like his videos make you feel like you're going to get rich and you can do it too. And there might be some truth in that, and people have made a lot of money. I mean, the reality is anyone who bought the MetaZoo kit and the FAB early kits and actually flipped them made a ton of money, right? So there are going to be these examples. There are also going to be examples where people lose a lot of money, and maybe not so much right now because we're in a big period, mania period or a high period, but there might be times in the future. So it'll be interesting to watch all of that. But
So he sells lotto tickets that he mints, and he's a lot more successful than buying from the actual organization themselves. I understand why he's successful. He amassed a massive amount of capital for himself, was able to buy at bulk rates in a way that anybody couldn't. I would imagine, I would guess, I don't know, but I would assume that he probably bought at the mass discount rate for a couple of years before he decided, screw it, I'm going to cut off and choke my own supply of Patreon followers. So that way it's exclusive because it's never going to get better than this. Locked in that. It created a very exclusive clientele there in a way that the organization themselves hasn't. And he's capitalizing for him. So, I mean, all of this requires that you have a massive amount of capital to begin with to even make this gamble that I don't think
yeah,
to the person that you're talking about that he's potentially appealing to will ever have.
and I think his
So,
patrons get pretty good deals, but that's because Rudy gets phenomenal deals, and
but
so
he's not,
he's able to pass along some of those savings.
but
You
it's
know,
not fair to say, I don't think it's fair to say that he is responsible to say to all of his buyers, hey, you can be me. Or
yeah,
to say to all of his viewers, you can be me. Because yeah,
yeah,
sure,
or that
like,
sort of
like I totally see the potential, like I see the potential, but the way that he established his position, like even if he honestly, if he did say, hey, you could be me, I'd be more offended with with the luck and the ability
or how
where
many people could be him, right? I mean, they're literally like you can't like I think that there are people who are smaller versions of him. You know, lots of people who are smaller versions of him. There are people who are versions of him to some extent. Very few, but particularly in the sports card world, which is a world where there are people who are much bigger than him in terms of value of collection and these types of things. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I honestly, for me, it's an evolving feelings. I would say, like, it's a sort of
oh
evolving
yeah.
about my feelings about him. Like,
Honestly, I feel like he's
fascinating.
MPG's Gary V, to be honest with you. Like
Okay.
that is the direct comparison that I would pull. And it's like, yeah, he's a little bit gross, but he did great things. But yeah, he's kind of gross. Like,
Yeah.
it's
All right.
yeah, it's hard
Let's
for
keep.
me.
I think we should wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so, Chris.
Sure.
But I had a great time hanging out as always and talking. Thank you all in the chat for hanging out. Any last points on that? Should we take like a couple questions to end
Sure.
it? What are you feeling? And
I
feel
do a
free
couple questions.
to pull any out that you know.
Um, hmm.
Let's see. Oh, Mason is fact checking us. It looks like. Let's see what he said.
Oh, well, Kevin G, look, Alpha Investments, there's no way you can send out that amount of supply, and there's no way that you can take in that amount of orders without having a team. Like you have
Yeah,
to be more than one person. You cannot
Rudy
be one person.
claims it's just his family. So I do know that. So Mason was right that is the claim. So I don't know.
The amount of
He
product
talks
that
a lot. Rudy talks a lot about not trusting other people and only trusting his family and only trusting himself to run things. So, and that he just works like a madman. So all of that could be a story, right? Of like, I'm such a hard worker and I'm doing this all myself and I'm amazing and I'm, like, and that could, like, I work so hard could be part of, right. This is where you get into like,
I always operate. Look, even if the sweet saccharine story that they're telling you is true, okay, that's still several people working on it. And if you're not paying your family members, you're even more of a piece of shit. So he's still got a team of people who are helping him and who I'm sure he's incentivizing through whatever means to help him. So it's not one person. Like he is certainly the face of it, but like even in the most fanciful, fairyland, like prairie landscape that you can think of, he is not shifting out 900 pallets of product alone. Like that's not happening. And that's probably an exaggeration of the number for sure, but like 50 pallets, like he's not doing that alone. And that's probably a much more realistic number. And you need people to help you to do that. And there's going to be people behind the scenes. And sure, he can say that that's his family. And if it is great, way to help the community around you and way to help your family, that's tremendous. But it doesn't detract the fact that it's not just him. There's tremendous support underneath him. Wherever it comes from doesn't mean jack shit to me, to be honest with you. But he's got support underneath him, whether that's through employees or through family. An operation of that size requires members, clearly, because I know I can barely support the operation I'm handling, and it's not even the tiniest fraction of what he's doing. So even if there was 10 of me, yeah, yeah, there's got to be more.
All right, Peak That Shoe's been asking a question for a while. Jake, I've noticed a lot more world staff cards hitting the market. I know you prefer competitor cards, but do you think staffs have more upside because of them being easier to collect? So staffs have generally or historically been as valuable as the top 32s, which didn't ever make sense to me. Now some years it's possible that top 32s and staffs there were the same amount because there might not have been that many staff that year, so not that many may have been handed out. We don't really know, but I prefer the player one because it to me is part of it's an award. It's part of the event. That's to me is cooler than the staff one. But the staff, the theory about why the staff was worth as much as the top 32 or sometimes even more was because it was easier to find them ish, and people wanted one from every year in that category. And if you collected the top 32, you'd have to get like the top 16, the quarterfinal, semifinal. I never felt that way, but there were people who said that their OCD, this is what literally people would quote this. My OCD doesn't allow me to collect just the like different tiers from different years. So because it was so hard to get certain tiers from certain years, I just got the staff ones from all the years because it was the only thing that I could affordably and actually attain. So that's sort of where some of that price history comes from. I think the staff cards are great, like really great from Worlds also. Like I have some staff cards too. I just try to go for the other ones when they're around the same price. Personally like those a little bit better.
Comments on this video are gonna make me have to rewatch it.
What's going on?
So many things I've seen with people referencing my name have made me laugh. I'm gonna have to rewatch this to see my own reaction to certain things. I I don't know. Does that make me vain or not? I don't know. I'm gonna have to rewatch it now.
Yeah. You were very vain. So.
I'll live with it.
But, all right, guys.
I think it's time. Yeah.
I think it's about time. If anyone has a last minute question, we will answer it. You say, but yeah, so does rainy day work for MTG?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Let's see.
Mm. I'll be honest with you, it's kind of nice to be able to talk about MTG. It's
Yeah.
nice.
Well, I
I,
really,
it,
I,
mhm.
I, I really like the whole broader like collecting an MTG topic. I think that that's fascinating, and where MTG could go
It
if
is,
that became more accepted.
yeah, it is so difficult for me when I know like, and it's not when I know, it's like my repository of knowledge is in one industry and then you can't talk about it and you have to purely rely on your fundamentals. And I'm going to be honest, I've learned so much from just doing that. Like, it's crazy because you really have to like stand on your heels and like tiptoe up, and then you start to realize how much what you're saying is just made up.
Um, Pikachu says, "All right, this is our last question for today. Where do you guys see the market going after student loans hit, like Swami talks about?"
I mean, down. I think the market's going down. People are
um,
going to liquidate.
yeah, I think it's hard to track those things directly and know exactly when they're going to hit and when they're really going to affect and how many months after it's going to affect and all these types of things. But all of that, all of the money that was printed this year, all of the extra unemployment that people got, all of the delayed bills that people had to pay, or forgiveness on student loans or whatever, delayed payments of student loans, whatever it is, that that needs to correct. So all of that stuff is something that has to correct at some point. So when
Well,
that point is, I don't know.
yeah. Here's another thing though that's really important to remember because my wife has a ton of student loans. The interest was put on hold, so she didn't have to pay it. However, we've always understood that we would have to pay it, and when it came back, and when it comes back, we will be prepared to pay it. So there's a difference between when it comes back, impacting people who are not financially ready or who haven't planned around this. Now, if you didn't know it was coming back, that's going to impact you. However, I think the to what Jake mentioned, what's going to be more important than this returning is going to be the time impact in which it has on people who weren't prepared. Because if you weren't planning for this and you were spending a lot on TCGs, yeah, guess what? That's going to basically end up in a lot of people having to sell a lot of things to pay for things. How many people actually did that, and how many people aren't ready to repay debts they knew they incurred? Now, that could be larger than I expect because I assume people are generally responsible as a general rule of thumb. So I don't know how impactful that's going to be on pre-existing things that have been bought or sold. What I do think it will definitely restrict is buying going into the future, and that's where I think the impact will be.
Yeah, and that will bring prices down because sellers will need to sell and start to undercut each other. So it's yeah, it's something that we've been trying to say. It's like there were a lot of factors this year that caused prices to go up, and those factors are not indefinite. They're not always going to be there to prop things up. And so when that money leaves or has to go elsewhere, et cetera, it has to come from somewhere. Now, how much and what parts of the market, like that's the type of stuff I think about. Will some parts be affected more than other parts, and why?
Mm.
Um, all right. So thank you, Chris, man.
Hey,
Appreciate it. It was a blast as always.
I am
And
always happy to talk about MTG. Always
maybe
happy.
you and I should just do this, once in a while. But Zakil will be back with us soon, and it's always great to have him.
The voice of
And
reason.
and he does the outros, so we need that. But um, yeah, if you guys like this, let us know, and we will do this Pocket Change podcast like live. Uh, on occasion, maybe every couple of months. I don't know. whatever feels right, or just like when we feel like it once in a while. We've also thought maybe about bringing on a guest or something, something else we're playing with. So let us know what you guys would like, and really appreciate everyone hanging out tonight. And we will see you all. I don't know when our next like episode on our main channel is. Please, if you like this content, you can find us over there at the Pocket Change Podcast, and please subscribe and like. Oh God, our videos. That's what Chris, always pushes and tells me to say. So,
and you can follow me over at the Bane community on Patreon, on Patreon. And you can find me over on Twitter at Wolf of 10th Street. If anything I've said is wrong, definitely holler at me. I'm not shy. So there you go.
Yes. Great. Thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you all again soon.